live, and when we're live, I give salutes. In fact, I'll give you the devil's salute. Why not? You've earned it. Welcome to the Weekly Spinner Rack. I'm your host, Chris, and we're going to talk about the week's comic book news. We're going to talk about some of the comics that came out this week. Let me get my stack. There was some fun stuff, folks. Hate came back. I wasn't expecting that. I didn't have that on my card. I think Peach Momoko continues to do some very interesting storytelling stuff with Ultimate X-Men. And there's just some really cool comic book news to get to. But I'm excited because we have a guest. We have with us today a writer who has written for pretty much all of the publishers, done a lot of really interesting stuff at, Marvel, DC, Dark Horse, but he's done a lot of great creator-owned work over the years. Stuff that I've always enjoyed, like Godland, and more recently, Blood Squad 7. He's about to write some stuff with Dynamite on Johnny Quest. Folks, please put your hands together, even though we can't hear that. I've got with me Mr. Joe Casey.
Hello.
Joe, thank you very much for giving us some of your time today. I sincerely appreciate it.
I echo your shout out to Hate Revisited. That's the best book of last week.
Did you read it?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. It's great. It's great. I moved to Seattle about 10 years ago, and it's sort of helped contextualize some of Hate since it's set in this area. It's interesting. It's there's not too many comics in a way that center themselves in such an era and a place. So it is funny to see it get updated. But we're not here to plug other people's stuff. That would be silly. We're joking around, and one thing I thought of, I was taking a look back at some of your bibliography and stuff, and you've done a lot of different types of stories, certainly. But I will say that one through line to a lot of them is that there's a lot of humor to a lot of your stories. How important is humor to you in writing? Am I getting that right? Do you think that to say that there's a lot of humor to a lot of your stories?
Well, humor is a broad term. I think I tend to put things in my comics that I hope amuse me, and I get a kick out of it in the moment. And it's a lot of stuff that I don't know if anybody's going to get, because it's some of the stuff is very inside. The Easter eggs I usually put in there are very well hidden and well buried. But, when people get it, I'm gratified,
Yeah.
But everything that's you consider funny or humorous is usually there just to amuse myself.
But you know what? I think that's important, because who knows if a piece of art that you throw it into the world is going to connect. If you're at least enjoying it yourself, there's a pretty good chance, I think, that somebody else is going to think along the same lines, and you've at least not wasted your own time. I don't know. I'm being very optimistic here. But I would love to get just a very broad understanding of something here. You have written a lot of comics for a long time now, but you've also had a lot of success in TV. I'm sure a lot of people watching this would know this, but your collective studio has created some really popular shows like Ben 10.
Yep.
And so you could be working in that world, I assume, but you do keep working on comics. What is it basically about comics and what it offers as a storytelling medium that continues to draw you in and keep you engaged with comics for so long?
Well, I've loved comics for as long as I can remember. I mean, they are the first love. I still work in animation and in that side of the entertainment business, but comics have always been there. I've done them for free when I wasn't getting paid for them. It's great to get paid for them, but there's not a lot of money out there right now. So for me, it's all about the love of the game. And there's just nothing better as a storytelling medium in terms of getting directly the things in your head onto the page to an audience. There's not many levels of filter or interference like there is on a TV show or a movie or a video game or anything else that we found ourselves lucky enough to do. Comics are like direct communication,
Right.
and they've never let me down my whole life. The things that I loved as a kid, I still love to this day. The things I go back to and look at for inspiration still inspire me. The creators that I look back on for inspiration still inspire me. And it's just one of those things where I can't imagine life without comics. So I don't even try. I just keep doing them.
Well, you're preaching to the choir. I was just kind of curious because, for me, it's my favorite storytelling medium. But I understand exactly what you're saying. I can remember somewhere around maybe, 2014 being at a small press convention, and Frank Miller was talking about comics, and he was just saying that, he thinks of them sometimes as propaganda because it can be such a singular vision. Even when you're collaborating with one or two people, it's such a singular vision without too many levels to dilute the process. So it's interesting hearing you enunciate something similar. So I just read, of course, Blood Squad 7. That was a more recent book, only issue 1 is out so far, folks. Image Comics, continuation, of course, of Dutch. But I loved it. I'm primed to. I'm of the right age that definitely had. It was a big deal, I'll say, when Image came out in the 90s and had this new exciting shared universe. An interesting element for people that maybe haven't read it yet, and I did recommend it on this show, but it works on several levels. It's its own story, but it's in the Image Comics shared universe, which hasn't really been touched on a lot in the last few years. What brought you to the decision to explicitly say, this is going to be in the shared Image universe instead of maybe just being a story?
Well, when I did the Dutch series, or the first Dutch story for the Image 30th anniversary, because the Youngblood characters are no longer available as part of that Image shared universe, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I had to come up with a new backstory that Dutch could fit into that could at least keep him in the Image shared universe. So once I came up with the backstory of Blood Squad 7, which is in the very first strip that showed up in the anthology, after coming up with all that stuff, I was talking to Eric Stevenson about it, and I said, it'd be a shame to not go on with this after we built all this up. And we went through the old comics to see what we could use and what we couldn't use. And that shared universe concept for guys of our generation, I mean, we grew up with that stuff with Marvel and DC. It's part of our DNA. It's part of what we love about superhero comics. So it's like a muscle that hadn't been used when it came to applying that to Image Comics. And both myself and Eric were interested in seeing if it could be done. And so far, so good. We've been able to do flashback sequences. You'll see the first one in the next issue 2 that comes out with Savage Dragon, that places Blood Squad 7's history right smack in the middle of the Image shared universe that we all knew from when it first came out. There are scenes that you'll see. The Savage Dragon scene is a replay of the scene from Savage Dragon #3 from 1992.
Oh, wow.
Where Badrock shows up and they have a fight. Well, in our version, the Blood Squad 7 character of Blockhead is the one that shows up. But the scene plays out the same. You can put side-by-side comparisons with Eric's original issue and see it plain as day. And we do that a couple of 4 or 5 times during the first year of the book. And that's been great fun to kind of recontextualize our characters that are brand new into an established continuity. It's been a lot of fun.
What's cool is it's interesting to sort of play with this shared universe again. It's always had sort of a soft continuity, just like whatever is useful, people can share, and otherwise don't think too hard about it. But now it has been and it's hard to like wrap my head around this sometimes, but it's been 30 years and comics
Yeah.
and culture have changed. And it seems like you're able to like really comment on like just how different things can be. Like the idea, for instance, of the Blood Squad 7 30 years ago was meant to be celebrities and stuff, and how that's not necessarily going to play the same anymore.
Right.
Will that be a continuing element, sort of commenting on like basically a generation of change across comics themselves?
Yes, absolutely. What constitutes a celebrity now is a lot different than what constitutes a celebrity 30 years ago. It's completely different.
Right.
Whereas 30 years ago it was movie stars, rock stars. Now it's, TikTok stars, and
People like me. I'm a huge influencer, right. Joe.
Exactly. So that comparison and contrast will be an interesting element of the book.
Yeah.
It's funny because you're saying, the fact that it's been 30 years, it was when I realized that it's been more time between now and the start of the Image universe than it was between the start of the Marvel age of comics in the 60s and the golden age in the 40s. That was only 15 years.
Yeah.
And it's been 32 years since Image started. So that blows my mind. But I think
it is strange to think about.
Yeah. That kind of time passage, though, I think deepens the material. It gives it a resonance that it wouldn't have had 15 years ago, even.
I totally agree. Yeah. Like when Image started, even though it had some shared elements, it was more important to follow sort of each title. A shared universe, it never really takes off overnight. It needs some history to have some relevance and meaning behind it. I don't know. There's been so many different comic shared universes, and it never quite feels right at the beginning. It takes a while.
Well, it even took, Stan Lee's version of a shared universe was the occasional Spider-Man swings through the background, or there's a panel where there's a cameo. And
right.
It took a Roy Thomas to really dig in and go, no, this is a real continuity. It's and he got real deep into it. So I feel like that's where we're going with this. That real deep sense of this is a real world. These characters all existed in their own way, but they did overlap. They did interact. And what does that universe look like 30 years later?
That's interesting. I like it. I like that it's working on several different levels. Like I say, folks, this is sort of like, context that you can benefit if you're a comics buff, but it is still its own story. So definitely recommend that. But you've also got another book that's about to come out that I wanted to touch on, Johnny Quest.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, Johnny Quest is a little bit of a personal blind spot for me. That wasn't a cartoon I watched a lot of growing up. But my first question before I sort of get into the comic that you're doing is the fact that like Johnny Quest has had comics, but he hasn't had a lot of cartoons. The closest would be satire of Johnny Quest. Something like the Venture Brothers is a very direct satire. Does the fact that it had been parodied for so long make it any sort of an additional challenge, in your opinion, to write Johnny Quest and take it a little more seriously? Or is that not a factor at all?
It's not a factor for this reason. The original cartoon from the 60s and the Comico series from the 80s.
Yeah, William Mester Loebs.
Yeah, they're both really good. It's not like they were, not great, and so to take the piss out of them they're not an easy target. And the Venture Brothers is fantastic, but I feel like, to me, the takeoff on Johnny Quest is really thread thin, because it's not making fun of something that deserves to be made fun of. Those original cartoons and the comics are high quality, really high quality. So the fact that it has been parodied in certain places, didn't factor into it all because I could
Good.
look at the original material and take it as seriously as it deserved to be taken.
That's encouraging to hear that it's something that you clearly do respect. I mean, you always want to see if an existing property is in somebody's hands, that it's somebody that clearly has some love and affection for it. So that's encouraging. Like, as somebody though that isn't super plugged into Johnny Quest, what can you sort of tell me that this will be about? What's the entry point for new readers, in other words?
Well, Johnny Quest it's an adventure series about a scientist and his son, his adopted son, and their secret agent caretaker that takes care of the kids, while the scientist is inventing all this cool shit. And it's very globe hopping in its scope. It's got a little bit of an Indiana Jones vibe to it, if anybody's seen the old cartoons. And it's just, there's a spirit about it that really has always attracted me, that it's got this, again, I think Indiana Jones ended up taking a lot from it in tone and approach, because there are dramatic stakes, but it was always done with a light touch and an entertaining touch. The characters were always really likable. And even though, again, there were always dramatic stakes, their loyalty to each other, as I've been writing the series, that's the thing that I really was able to drill down on. This is, in a way, a found family that really sticks together no matter what, looks out for each other. And I think that on an unconscious level, when I used to watch as a kid, it had a real comfort food kind of vibe to it because of that specifically. Now, having said that, the cartoon has a really great comic book pedigree. Doug Wildman, Alex Toth, these are giants in comics before they worked in animation. So that to me is this added level of authenticity. So when they called up and said, "Hey, you want to do this?" It took me about 2 seconds to go, yes, I do, because it wasn't just another translation of another cartoon. This was really seeped in comic book history and real comic book geniuses.
That's a very fair point. Yeah. Now that I think of it, right. If Dynamite is doing both this and Space Ghost, they should really be sort of putting out some sort of Alex Toth marketing blitz. But oh god, just Toth was a genius. Yeah. What about like in your version? Is it set in the past when the original show was, or is this a modern day story? Just curious.
Well, it begins in the past. I can say that it begins in the past in 1964 when the original series aired.
Yeah.
One thing people don't recall about the 1980s comic series from Comico was that was set in the 80s. They kind of updated everything and put it in the present day. But I wanted to do a period piece. I'm a big fan of the design of the show, that Art Deco kind of vibe that it had, and I didn't want to lose that. And the fact that they are products of the 60s has a lot to do with the story that we tell.
Very cool. I'm excited to read it because I've been reading your stuff for a long time. I mean, the fact that you wrote Youngblood at one point really made me excited to see what you were doing with Blood Squad 7. I was like, this guy legit knows this history and stuff. Is there anything else, Joe, that we should keep our eye out for right now? Is there anything else that you've got coming out?
Yes, but I can't talk about it at the moment. There's a big project for another company. I'll come back, Chris. I'll come back because this is a big one.
I would love that.
But this year has been kind of a return to comics for me. I've been doing stuff. I really didn't have a lot out on the stands during the pandemic, but I was writing the whole time. And now here we are. This stuff is finally starting to come out. The Kneel Before Zod series from DC is still going. And then there are things that I wrote over the pandemic that still haven't come out. So it feels like, I'm finally getting back to doing the thing that I love most, which is writing comics. And I'm just glad this stuff is starting to come out. Blood Squad 7's been in the works for a year and a half.
Oh, okay.
A long lead time on some of this stuff.
Yeah.
But I'm thrilled that people are responding to Blood Squad 7 in particular, because it was a bit of a Hail Mary that there were at least enough readers out there who had invested when they were younger in that image shared universe, that this return to it would be, welcomed, which I'm totally gratified to see that.
I think the timing is perfect though, Joe. When we look at like what the most popular stuff is right now, it's this sort of like mid 80s to early 90s right now. Like I would have thought that my generation was like almost too old. We weren't like the main comics buyers, but then I see like Ninja Turtles and Transformers selling higher than they ever have before. I see this interest in like, looking back at the 90s through books like Local Man and Blood Squad 7. And I'm like, no, my generation X like has our hooks in the comics world, and we're going to get what we want.
We're not done yet, Chris. We got a ways to go before we
got a window. And I saw one question before I let you go. I did see one question fly by in my live chat room. People are curious, Joe. How many pairs of sunglasses do you own?
At least one.
At least one there. Folks, an exclusive. I didn't know if I would get one on the show today, but Joe Casey has opened up. He has at least one pair of sunglasses. Yeah. Joe, right. Thank you for giving us some time. I really am liking the Blood Squad 7, and I'm excited to give Johnny Quest a try. So thank you very much for giving us some of your time this afternoon.
I appreciate that, Chris. I watch your channel and you do a great job, and I'm really happy that you had me on today.
That's super kind of you. And whenever your secret project gets formally announced, yes, open invitation. I would love to talk to you in more in depth, go over some of your history, and learn whatever your new project is. So I'm just extending that. Thank you very much for your time today, Joe.
I would love that. Thanks, Chris.
All right. Take care. All right. I'll now switch my attention to looking at the exact same camera, but now I'm talking to you, folks in the live chat. I hope you enjoyed that, because I found that very interesting. If any of you, well, it looks like I'm seeing a lot of familiar names in the live chat. So you know that I was pretty excited to have read that Blood Squad 7 book. It really connected with me on several levels. So that was cool. Joe Casey's been writing comics. Boy, what? I mean, I remember definitely super early 2000s stuff. What's funny, folks, is just before the show, I realized one of his early stories, Immigrant Song, was published in the pages of Battle Pope by Robert Kirkman. So that was fun to go to remember and just realize I've definitely been exposed to Joe's writing for a long time. Yeah, I'm probably likely to check that out. Yeah, probably. You remember his work on Cable. I haven't read The Bounce, but I have heard some good things from friends. So yeah. Yep. Jose Ladron. And I really liked his work on Godland with Tom Scioli. Godland, folks, if you haven't read it, that's a pretty interesting story. Going back to the vibe of cosmic Marvel, the stuff, and not just Marvel, now that I think of it, like DC too, but like stuff Jim Starlin would often write. I've got a lot of stuff that we have to cover, and I'm excited to do it. So let me add this. Boom. Little Chris. Big news. Look at all this news that we've got to talk about this week. There's so much. So beyond the stunning acting I'm doing for that, what do you call it? For that thumbnail. Huh? We will get into this. Let's talk about something fun right up top, you all know that I am in the bag for Daniel Warren Johnson. His stuff just speaks to me. Well, he's got a new comic coming out. This guy works very hard. He usually has more than one project going at a time, and there's an overlap, but this is one that he's writing, to be clear. The moon is following us. Let me give you some details. So he announced this week in his blog, got picked up by all the comic book news sites, of course. Riley Rossmo is going to be the artist on this. This cover is by Daniel, but Riley Rossmo does the interior art duties, and it's a fantasy world. I don't know if I'd quite call it supernatural, but I'd say fantasy more than sci-fi. Specifically, it's described as such. The moon is following us revolves around a couple named Sam and Duncan Lamar. When their daughter is kidnapped by a mysterious force known as the Cascade, Sam and Duncan will fight alongside a group of magical beings to bring her back by any means necessary. Look, Daniel Warren Johnson's clearly a family man. That through line you can see through a lot of his stories. But you know what? When you can write about something that's real and relatable and give it actual emotional weight, I think it works. I think he's really cluing into something that people like to see, even if they don't have, a perfect family relationship in real life. It can be charming to see how far people will go for each other in an ideal world. I've seen that from Extremity to Murder Falcon to Do a Powerbomb. And I feel like that's probably going to be an element of The Moon is Following Us. By the way, I guess he got that title from his daughter. Like, it's something she said. She kept looking over like her shoulder while she was being carried and said, "The moon is following us." It's cute. That comes out September 18th. So a few months away, but wanted to put it on people's radar. His books tend to do pretty well. I mean, all I can say is right now, I personally hope that Skybound is giving him a dump truck of money, because I don't want him to move on from Transformers. I just really like his take on it, but we will see. Whoops, what's this? Morning from the Edge of the World. Did I miss the AI blow up? Nope, just starting with the news. I am doing A-OK. I think he should be able to, but I think he likes to draw too, so we will see. I feel like there's got to be something else in the works, but who knows? I think he's planning on doing like an art book soon, because he's at a point where he could put together a lot of existing material that he's already drawn and release that while he's writing. He's a really good writer, so I don't blame him if he wants to devote a bunch of his time to writing. I love his artwork, but he's a very good writer. It's a great skill. There's a few people throughout comics who have had the ability to do both very, very well. There are guys that have made their name on that, like Jim Starlin and John Byrne. These are people that made their names because they were, both good writers and artists. New York Comic Con Artist Alley tables. I call it a price debate. It's more just that it was being talked about on Comics Beat, and it got me thinking and looking into it. And let's just say that Artist Alley at New York Comic Con, a lot more expensive than I initially realized. So New York Comic Con specifically has listed their prices on their website. You can look right now. Most sites don't tell you exactly what they're going to charge. You have to apply, get approved, and then you find out sort of what it is. Anyway, $565 for one 6-foot table and a badge for yourself. If you need to get a badge for like an assistant or anything, that's more. $565 for a 4-day event. It's getting up there. It's getting way up there. It was $525 last year. I think generally tickets went up by about $10 to $15 for everything else, VIP, 4-day, Saturday, pro badge, whatever it is. Like they all went up a little, but it was $525 for a table last year, $565 for a table this year. Beyond being expensive, the thing you need to factor in here is that New York is a much more expensive city than most other cities. I have not personally tabled at, like, say, both events, but I would imagine that New York is more expensive than San Diego. I would imagine. Can they make that back during the con? I think that you can. I think that if you're a big name professional, I think, Jim Mafood has been doing it for several years. I've never asked him the numbers on it, but I'm sure that he makes a profit. I don't know how big a profit would be. Somebody like Peach Momoko, has a line just about out the door. These days, so do people like, say, Scott Snyder, Jim Lee. But then there's a lot of people that get approved that do more like prints and aren't necessarily ongoing comic book artists. And you sort of wonder if they're making their money back. $600 worth of goods just to break even. But keep in mind, how much is a hotel? How much is food? Just the basic necessities. Maybe you live locally, but still food. Cabs, Ubers, or trains, subway, the flight or something there. It's pretty expensive. That's a pretty clever way around it. Yes, you could cosplay as a table and maybe sell some of your space as you walk around. So that's a good idea. Let's see. And that's a lot. I looked at like the history I couldn't find like Artist Alley table price, but what I could find was how much a 4-day VIP pass cost in 2013 versus this coming year. In 2013, a 4-day pass VIP, $190. This year, $575. Now here's the thing. It's still sold out. The VIP pass did still sell out. So I guess, whatever they're charging, people are willing to pay. But over a decade-long period, you're telling me that it's gone up more than twice as much? Like, inflation doesn't quite account for that. That's a lot. The highest I've ever had to pay for a table and badge at a con is $250. $565 makes me cross-eyed. Yes. That is high, right? It looks like San Diego Comic Con costs up to $400 a table. I saw somebody tell me today that it was like $350. That's still a lot for a big convention, but here's one difference, folks. San Diego Comic Con is a non-profit organization, whereas New York Comic Con is a for-profit. It's run by ReedPop. So I would expect the for-profit one to cost the most and the non-profit to be significantly lower. I believe for a long time, San Diego Comic Con, it was free to get an Artist Alley table, and it was just sort of like you'd have to still get approved and first come, first served. So even if it's like, say, $350, for a huge convention, that's not anywhere close to New York. But it is still a lot for a nonprofit to charge, in my opinion. I'm like, you know what? Why don't you charge Hollywood out the wazoo to book room H when they need to do their presentation for, I don't know, something that's not even comic book related? I'm sure next year they'll have Bad Boys 5 book out Hall H. New York Comic Con started, how long has it been? It might be like 13 or 14 years old, somewhere around there. I've been going since the beginning, but it's hard to remember. San Diego Comic-Con is only a 4-foot table. On the website, EJ, it said 6, but thank you for dropping in a line. Folks, coming live to us from Japan, because EJ, I saw your post just a little while ago that you were on I forget the name of this, the Godzilla Street over in Shinjuku. I saw that you were over in Shinjuku. San Diego Comic Con. Oh wait, you said San Diego, not New York. Excuse me. So you would know. San Diego Comic Con, 4-foot table barely fit a person. Yeah. Very. I don't know. I just brought this up because at some point we need to push back, but here's what I see as a problem right now in conventions. And I love conventions, by the way. I always have a good time, whether it's a small, intimate one where you're going to find and discover some cool indie, self-published stuff that people are passionate about, or you're going to go to a humongous convention and you're going to see the best cosplay of your life and, maybe get some signatures by your favorite big name stars. I love conventions. But ever since the pandemic, it has been hard to get actual publishers to justify the spending to get a huge exhibition space at a convention. I haven't seen Image themselves or, DC at a convention in like 5 years. Oh, you were in Kabukicho on Friday. Got it. Well, thank you for still checking in all the way from Taiwan. I call it the Godzilla Street. There's a place in Shinjuku where I'm trying to remember the name of the hotel, Gracery. It's called Hotel Gracery, and they have a basically 2-scale Godzilla head up on like the 20th floor or something like that, and an arm, and it looks like he's climbing around the building. And at night, his mouth lights up every like 30 minutes, and like they spit out like mist. It looks like he's doing his what do you call it? It looks like Godzilla's doing his atomic fire breath. It's great. So I call it like Godzilla Street, but it's not really Godzilla Street. It's a great view. Anyway, I just thought I'd talk about it, how prices have gone up. And in my opinion, they're going I'm thinking that as the big publishers aren't there as exhibitors, that maybe these conventions are trying to make up that lost revenue in ticket prices in Artist Alley. And I'd say, I don't know how great that is as a long-term solution, because at a certain point, you are going to push out those people that cannot afford it. And then what are you left with? I don't think that I'm sorry, but you need to find a way to make it a must-attend event for the exhibitors and the Hollywood type people and get the money off of them. That's what you need to do. My opinion. Speaking of conventions, I'll switch over to this. I mean, this is a little sad, but I feel like it's also a little hopeful. Let's remember Ed Piskor. His family is doing so much work to keep his legacy alive. His siblings are doing a lot. So one of the things that they're doing is they have created the Eddie P. Comic Con. So a little convention in his honor. So this is a one-day convention that's going to be in Southeast Pittsburgh, specifically the, what do you call it, West Mifflin area. Pittsburgh, famously where Ed was from. Tables, if you wanted to get a table at this convention, folks, $75. And I think that there's another fee if you need electricity of like $25. In other words, $100. For a one-day small convention, I don't think that's too bad. Tickets, if you just want to attend, $5. Hard to beat that. Because they have got a pretty good lineup of indie creators. So that's really nice. I think that that's a good idea. I hope it's a success for them. I'm really impressed with Ed's siblings for putting in all this hard work. One other thing they did just this past weekend, they tabled at Heroes Con, and they had a panel in his honor talking about the stuff that Ed did. Jim Rugg was on that panel, frequent guest on this channel. Jim Mafood was on that panel. Just great thing. Yeah, I think that's a good way to remember an artist, to try to just create a convention. And I think starting modest like that is a really good idea. I can't justify the vacation time and travel expense, unfortunately, being on the West Coast. I wish I could go to something like this, but no, can't quite do it. Yep. Yeah. As long as you're in Pittsburgh, maybe you go to the mall that they filmed the original Dawn of the Dead in, right? I forget the name of that mall, but yeah. There's a link if you guys want to look later. You could also just literally Google Eddie P Comic Con and you should find it. They've got like a little Google form doc if you want to table there. So it should be nice. Oh, look at this. I actually met Ed's siblings at Heroes Con on Saturday. They were lovely and expressed my condolences. Oh, you expressed your condolences for their loss. That's very nice. That's very nice. Yeah. I'm glad that you were able to do that. It's been 2 months, and I'm not going to lie. I think about this every day still. I think about this every day. It just seemed so avoidable. And I'm not trying to be depressing, but what's happened has happened. And I think it would be nice to try to remember Ed as much as possible. Oh, and by the way, my understanding is that the Heroes Con panel about Ed was recorded and will go up on the Cartoonist Kayfabe channel eventually. So that I have that in good standing that it will be there. Yes, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. I think that they are just about done with their archived stuff that they did for like their patrons. But yeah, things like this, like the convention should be uploaded there. All right. Moving on. Let me talk about something sort of related that's pretty tragic. Just because this literally is something that we learned about all of 1 or 2 hours before I started my show last week. So I mentioned it at the top, but we didn't know much. We've learned some more. Comicstorian Benny Potter passed away just over a week ago now. And this one also upsets me. Again, somebody that I knew. Yeah. Anyway, so Benny was only 40. First of all, which is just tragic. I'm a lot older, not a lot, but I'm older. So just crazy. He started his channel so much earlier than I did. So the news reports have come out and basically what happened, unfortunately, is he rolled his vehicle. It went off the road and it rolled over and he died. They did a screening. He wasn't drinking. He wasn't on drugs. He had his seatbelt on. There was nobody else in the car. There was no second vehicle. This is just, his wife had posted that it was, an unfortunate accident. And that's exactly what it seems to be. Somebody lost control of their vehicle. And it just shows you how fragile things can be. Yeah, just really, really, really sad. Be careful when you're driving. We take it for granted because we do it so much, but God, you're moving at like crazy speeds in a huge amount of weight. And the last thing I can say, because I want to try to put a helpful, hopeful bit at the end here, is that his wife, Natalie, has said that she intends to keep the channel going. So, Benny had assembled essentially a crew to work with him. And while he was the voice and the face, it looks like they're going to try to keep that going too. I certainly at least wish, my condolences to his family and friends, and I hope for his wife's sake that she is able to continue it going. These are just two really tragic things that both happened 2 months apart. And I'm not going to lie, folks. It's hitting me harder than I even would have expected, since neither of these are people that I hung out with regularly. But I did know both of them, and they're both, operating in my same world, and I'm older than both of them. And it's really hard for me to wrap my head around the idea of somebody younger than me being gone and that I'm still here. It really upsets me quite a bit. I've been having a hard time lately, and things like this are not helping, but I'm also not trying to make it about me. I'm just saying that it's very sad. It's very sad. And I wanted to at least acknowledge it. We try to have fun on this show. But this is comic book related news, and I thought it was worth mentioning. Yeah. We'll try to move on to something a little more positive now. So, huge swing here. I don't have a good segue, but I do want to talk about just how mind-blowing these sales numbers are, folks. Ninja Turtles #1, the upcoming relaunch. Wow. So, first issue in this relaunch, which is continuing the same continuity, to be clear, but it's starting sort of from it's got like a small time jump, and it's starting fresh, a level setting for new readers. It's written by Jason Jones, first issue, art by Joel Jones. IDW had orders from stores, 300,000 copies. 300,000 copies. Wow. This is before any reprints or anything. Ninja Turtles is as big as it's ever been. It really is. That's just wild. This equals where Transformers #1 is right now with its reprints. And Transformers #1 has definitely been one of the biggest things in comics in the last year. But wow, Ninja Turtles hit 300,000 copies. It's just amazing. Kevin breaking down the math for us. Thank you. It's like 75,000 for each turtle. None for Splinter. None for Splinter. This is the ongoing IDW Comics continuity. Yeah. Wait, what did I say? I called Jason Aaron Jason Jones. Oh, I must have been jumping forward. I meant Jason Aaron and Joel Jones. Sorry. Very impressive numbers. Put it in some more context. 2 years after its launch, Ninja Turtles Last Ronin, that hardcover, continues to be in the top 10 best-selling graphic novels and trade paperbacks. Most of those, like I think 8 of those other slots, by the way, are manga. But Ninja Turtles, well after it's been out, Last Ronin continues to sell very, very well. I heard, by the way, that for the live-action movie, I don't know how likely this is, but I heard that the studio is looking into talking to Judith Hoag, the original April O'Neil from the 1990 movie, to potentially reprise her role as April O'Neil, because April is a big part of Last Ronin. That would be interesting. Got it. Yeah. IDW's been going since 2011. Yeah. They did 150 issues. They're doing a sort of a time skip forward to sort of account for, like, you know, a good jumping on point. But yeah. Hey, look, somebody that has recently drawn some Ninja Turtles. Andy had a story in the Free Comic Book Day Ninja Turtles book just last month. Andy says, high five TMNT and Jason Aaron. It's crazy that Jamie Rich just quit IDW right as this is happening. Gee, I wonder if Andy is here to give us a segue. By the way, this comes out July 24th. Jamie S. Rich quits IDW for something new. Who am I talking about? I'm talking about IDW's editor-in-chief, Jamie S. Rich. He's stepped down to pursue another opportunity. What is that opportunity? Yet to be announced. But that's a big deal when an editor-in-chief steps down from any publisher. Yeah. I've got more to say about Jamie S. Rich and Ninja Turtles, but let me go through this. He hadn't been in the role that long. Jamie S. Rich stepped in as the editor-in-chief at IDW May of 2023. May of 2023. So basically did just over 1 year. One of the things he did oversee the renewal of the Ninja Turtles license. For the 40th anniversary, there were news articles that apparently that, like, because IDW licenses that from Viacom, Nickelodeon. They're the owners of Ninja Turtles right now. But that's a big deal. That's obvious. Look at the numbers on TMNT #1 and Last Ronin. Ninja Turtles is absolutely one of the biggest components to IDW's current success. You say that he's going to Marvel or DC, but I feel like he's already done that. So I don't know if that sounds right. He started, Jamie did, as an assistant editor at Dark Horse. He went to Oni. I believe he left for a while and did some freelance stuff in books. He was an editor at DC's Vertigo imprint, at DC's Young Animal imprint. He was Webtoon Tapas editor-in-chief, and then he stepped over to IDW. So he has been a senior editor at a lot of different organizations. If he's been at DC for so long, I don't know if he would be going back to somewhere like there. I mean, maybe. Actually, now that you say that, but I feel like this would have been announced. But Batman, I don't think, has a group editor right now, and that's a pretty important position in the world of comic book editing. I don't know. Like that's just one big opening I can think of right now within the world of comic book editing, is that Batman needs a group editor. But we'll see. We'll see. I think he rejected one of my comic book scripts back in the 90s. Hopefully, anything that can block Kevin Street stories from getting in front of the rest of our eyeballs is a net positive for the industry. I'm totally teasing. Good luck with any of your creative pursuits, Kevin. I would never, ever actually want to stand in the way of any of that. Covers with like a million different characters are always fun to look at. They must require so much planning to get right. Bleeding Cool reported that IDW reached out to former editor-in-chief Chris Ryall to return, but that he declined. So I guess that was their first thought as to who to plug in that hole. But that's a no-go. Maybe they'll offer him more money and he'll say yes. Who knows? I don't know who else would be, a high-level editor that they would currently sort of be considering for that. But yeah, if you're an editor in comics, there's a couple good openings right now. I'll say that. There's a couple good openings. Criminal adds some more actors to its cast. And I put a photo of one that I appreciate. I think that Michael Mando is a good actor. Anyway, Gus Halper, Aaliyah Camacho, and Michael Mando have all joined the cast of Prime Video's Criminal in recurring roles. And that is an adaptation, if it isn't clear, of the Ed Brubaker, Sean Phillips crime comics. So they join, these are actors that we already know are going to be on the show. Charlie Hunnam, Adria Arona, Richard Jenkins, Kadeem Hardison. I was a little surprised seeing him. I feel like I hadn't seen Kadeem in anything in a while. Logan Browning, Pat Healy, Taylor Sele, and John Hawkes. A really eclectic group of good actors. I love who they're putting together. I don't know why that got sort of italicized, but I guess that's so that I say Gus Halper will play Ricky Lawless. That's an important role in the first Criminal story arc. He's an unstable addict, and he's known Leo. That's going to be played by Charlie Hunnam, basically the main character in the first story. Since they were both teenagers, they're both sons of career criminals. So that's how they knew each other growing up. And I just wanted to talk about Michael Mando because I think he's really good. He was on, what was that clone show? Something Black. You guys know I'm bad at names. All of a sudden, I'm even forgetting the actress's name. She played She-Hulk. I can't remember. Orphan Black? Was that the name of the show? I think that was the name of the show. That was actually a really good show. Orphan Black. Michael Mando was on, and then he went on to be on Better Call Saul. Man, he did a great job as a really nuanced character. Just a guy who was always in a bad place and was trying to make the most of things and get out of that bad place. But God, it was tragic. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Thank you. Tatiana Maslany. Yeah. Tatiana Maslany is fantastic, by the way, on Orphan Black. If you just want to see an actress play a ton of different versions of herself, it's astounding. Some of them are just so wildly different, but like believable in and of themselves. But yeah, Michael Mando is incredible on Breaking Bad. If you don't know those shows, you probably at least saw him as Mac Gargan in Spider-Man Homecoming. Potentially the future Scorpion. But anyway, so yeah, on Criminal, though, I got massively sidetracked. He's going to play Jeff. He's a vice detective, an angry cop, a bad cop, a corrupt cop, a cop that it's looking to screw everybody over on one big score. Definitely the wild card in the story. One of them. Really, I did not mind the ending of Better Call Saul. No, I thought it was quite good. I think that ultimately the original show that it spun off from, Breaking Bad, was a perfect finale. But I thought that the finale of Better Call Saul was good. Good show, by the way. Good show. Burn! I really need to have special effects and stuff. Like when somebody has like a really good one-liner or something, like just flames pop up all over the screen. That would be fun. Need a producer for that. No question. If they ever decide to bring him back and make him Scorpion, he'd be fantastic. Who knows? There's so many characters they could bring in. They could probably form like a Sinister 12 at this point. As long as I'm talking about streaming shows that adapt comics, I'll mention that Sweet Tooth has become Netflix's #1 show on the week it debuted. So the third and final season of Sweet Tooth, and that's an adaptation of Jeff Lemire's comic. It debuted on Netflix, instantly shot to the #1 most watched show. There's always like a top 10 most watched, and shot there right away. So I guess people really love Sweet Tooth. I never finished season 1, even though I liked it. I'm just so busy that I kept falling behind. I kept thinking I'd get back to it, and now, boom, we're in season 3. Rotten Tomatoes had it initially at a 100% positive from reviewers. I just looked before the show started, and now it's at 93%. So when I typed up the news, it changed slightly from when I had to update the image. All of a sudden, I was like, "Oh, I better double check on that." That is super cool. Like, kudos to Jeff Lemire. That's like, a creator owned, I think. He did it through DC, didn't he? Well, anyway, he wrote and draw it. It's a great story, and it's really cool to see it doing this well. I never even started it. Didn't know there even was a second season. It's crazy. Sometimes they don't promote this stuff, but it does get watched, obviously, by a loyal base, and that base must be pretty big for it to become #1 on the platform, because Netflix does have a massive platform. Let's see. What else did I have about that? I looked at a couple of the reviews. Paste called it one of the best comic book adaptations ever made. That's pretty amazing. If you don't know it, if you haven't read it, it's a good story. It follows a little boy, but it's a post-apocalyptic show because there was a virus that came out. It killed off most of humanity, and now we're sort of a little while past that. People are rebuilding and stuff, but there are towns, because people will congest to common areas, but like in between, lots and lots of space, very far apart. There's some similarities, now that I think of it, to, what was that HBO Max show that was based on the video game? The Last of Us, a little bit like how spread out The Last of Us is. But yeah, now there are people that are being born with animal features, and most people are really scared of them. They want to kill them or lock them up or experiment on them. And so like this little boy is getting escorted by like a tough guardian across the country. So it's basically sort of a road movie type of story. Yeah, it's really cool. I loved the first 2 seasons, but its dark elements were lessened for the adaptation. Maybe some storylines were too dark with child actors. Maybe. I think sometimes also, honestly, I think you can sometimes tell darker things with illustrations, and as soon as you make it live action, it hits in a different way. And that's part of why I kind of like comics as my favorite storytelling medium. You can have, say, Gus, the kid with horns, and he's just as real as, his human bodyguard. It's not as bleak as McCarthy's The Road. No way. There's still hope to rebuild. If you haven't read The Road, folks, or seen the movie, in The Road, everything is dead, and eventually that's going to be it. Like, trees and grass and fruit aren't going to regrow anymore. That's how bad things are. So all you can do is scavenge like canned foods and stuff like that. It's such a depressing and bleak world. It's a dark, dark story. Yeah. And this dad is just doing everything he can to keep his son alive. But it really brings up existential questions of, at a certain point, why? Like, what gives you hope? Oh, sorry. I think Jeff Lemire said they lightened the show because so many post-apocalyptic shows were coming out when this was being made. That tells you something, I think, because it's true. First of all, we do have a lot of post-apocalyptic stories in media right now. And I think that just shows like a general depression and anxiety about the state of the world. Yes, I wanted to mention that. So thank you, Sam Hawkins. Will Forte is really good. Will Forte has done a few serious roles. You see him in something like MacGruber, which I happen to love. It's not for everybody, but I love MacGruber. And he's so foul and like unlikable and silly. But he's done some very serious dramatic work too. I think wasn't he in the movie Nebraska, I think, as the main character's son? I think that was the name of the movie. Yeah, Why the Last Man, The Last of Us, and then you get into comics and there's even more. I mean, we just had Furiosa come out in the movie theaters. There's a lot of things. The pandemic was possibly a factor, but I would assume that those stories would be sort of coming out right now, and these stories have been coming out for like a little while. Anyway, I like Will Forte a lot. I liked MacGruber, and I liked its TV show too. I liked the Peacock TV show. Yes, okay, it was Nebraska that he was in, with also from Better Call Saul and Mr. Show, Bob Odenkirk. Bob Odenkirk. Anyway, wow, I didn't expect us to talk this much about Sweet Tooth, but that's part of the fun of this show, is going on tangents about the news. The Adobe terms of service obviously have caused a lot of uproar. I wanted to try to put some of it in a little context with two different sides to things. So I just decided to copy and paste the quotes. The first one I have is, I think, a pretty good representation of the fears that artists have when Adobe have these new terms of service that seem to indicate that they have the right to use anything you create with their products for marketing purposes, and to potentially train on AI and stuff like that. That's the concern. So Yannick Paquette, great artist, has done a bunch of stuff with Grant Morrison in the past. I just have one thing represented here of Wonder Woman Earth 1. But this is what Yannick posted on the 10th, so 7 days ago. Adobe Photoshop is dead to me. Their fully embracing of AI is the last nail in the coffin. That software was never intended for us comic people anyway. Drawing has nothing to do with mosaic filter and specific lens corrections. Their subscription pricing are clearly not aimed at starving digital artists. I've been using Clip Studio Paint exclusively since Wonder Woman Earth 1. Awesome perspective tools, better ink assist, lettering, now even colors is on par with Adobe. It's $49. That certainly met up with what I was thinking until I read this press release by Adobe, and I'm trying to be hopeful that this might mean that Adobe just did a bad job on their terms of service update. Here's what Adobe said anyway, and then we'll see. We recently rolled out a reacceptance of our terms of use, which has led to concerns about what these terms are and what they mean to our customers. This has caused us to reflect on the language we use in our terms and the opportunity we have to be clearer and address the concerns raised by the community. Over the next few days, we will speak to our customers with a plan to roll out updated changes by June 18th, 2024. At Adobe, there is no ambiguity in our stance, our commitment to our customers, and innovating responsibly in this space. We've never trained generative AI on customer content, taken ownership of a customer's work, or allowed access to customer content beyond legal requirements. Nor were we considering any of those practices as part of the recent terms of use update. That said, we agree that evolving our terms of use to reflect our commitments to our community is the right thing to do. I hope that that's true. And let's see tomorrow if we see an updated terms of use that's maybe not written in full legalese that we can understand and not be scared by. I hope that that's true. I hope so. Interesting, saying that it's just backpedaling. It might be, but I always wondered if it could be us misinterpreting it, because I was like, if they're saying that they can take anything that's generated and use it, like, I was like, you can't be looking at stuff doctors use or lawyers use and like government work. You can't. So I don't know. What was Unity? I don't know what Unity was. Sorry. It's not a good look either way. That's true. That's true. A lot of people do not give Adobe the benefit of the doubt that I seem to have. I hope it's true too. I hope so. We'll see. Thank you. Well, we'll see. I use Adobe products, and I hate the idea of it being used to train AI or to use something that I created for promotional work. Like, that's my work. But we'll see. We'll see. I just thought it would be interesting to give both points of view over their terms of use thing. And basically tomorrow they're saying that we're going to get an update, and I don't know what to make of this, because I was definitely like scared enough that I was thinking of, like, dropping Adobe. I definitely was. Do you use Illustrator at used car? Nope. Didn't someone already found their artworks used? I haven't touched Photoshop since they went subscription base. I don't know, EJ. That's definitely possible. I didn't come across that news article, but that's definitely possible. I just don't know. I don't know. We'll see. An evolving news story, and I just wanted to put this in so that if things change next week, we have sort of a base to build on. Well, I work for like a nationwide company, and I don't get to work in their marketing department. That's probably where I'd fit in better, but I just work I just sell used cars. Sort of on a related note, let's talk about it. This was what I had in the thumbnail. This like, wow. I somehow was blissfully unaware of artist Francesco Mattina. I did not love what I came across. I'm trying to be very careful these days with AI stories when people are like, I think this artist is using AI, but then there isn't, like, say, a history of tracing or using, like, digital stuff. If there isn't that, I'm going to err on the side of caution. But boy, on this one, it doesn't seem like this artist has a great track record. And I'm surprised that DC would allow something that even has these mistakes. So let me talk to you about what this story is. It really got attention this week when comics artist, MCU concept designer Adi Granov called out Francesco Mattina on this. This is a variant cover for the upcoming Action Comics number 1069. 69. This is what Adi wrote. Let me share that. When image generators first came to prominence, the first person who came to mind was the serial plagiarist Francesco Mattina, as I thought he'd think all of his Christmases have come at once. If you don't remember, he made a whole career out of photo bashing other people's art, mine included, into whatever you want to call his work. I don't post about artists I dislike, but I neither consider him an artist, nor can I hide my dislike for the continued blatant plagiarism. Harsh words, right? Anyhow, here's his new cover. Not only is he a hack, but he's not even good enough to hide the glaring mistake on one of the most iconic symbols in all of pop culture. If you haven't picked up on it yet, and I did try to highlight it in my thumbnail, if you, at a quick glance, you're like, cool, Superman cover. You have to look closer when it's AI. And if we look at the S, whoop, and then it's got the bottom part of the S repeated. And your eye, when you just glance at it, can sort of miss that unless you really stare and focus on it. But basically, on the underneath the bottom part of the S with the bulb, there's traditionally just sort of a yellow triangle shape. But this has a second bottom S loop going across to cut that triangle in half, and then there's a triangle under it. And that's just one thing. People were like noticing weird artifacts, like, say, this button on Lois's jacket, which doesn't really make sense. Or the fact that her earrings, if you zoomed in, look like they're literally going just more through her ear than through her lower lobe. You know, there's weird things like that. And then Neb's Good Takes on Twitter put together a thread of explaining some of what Adi Granov was saying, showing copied, traced artwork done in Photoshop, and then some of the tricks used in AI to hide that it's AI. For instance, AI artists will often add these blur effects to cover up some of the mistakes. They'll use highlights, lots of lens flares to cover up other mistakes. Because, like, where is this light even coming from? Like, does this make sense? Like, what are we looking at? I don't know. Yeah, check for symmetry. Check for things like where do things connect, including hair or belts, things like that. Of course, check hands, because for some reason they still can't get hands right. Thank you, Steve. Heatwave, stay hydrated and stay cool. That's great advice. That's great. Why is there a medieval castle behind Lex? It's weird. You glance at this and at first it doesn't necessarily look bad. It looks eye-catching because of like the color and the composition. But then when you look at the details, it starts to fall apart. Like, what is this castle? Why specifically would an artist put in a castle, but then not make it clear what that castle is? Like, that would seem to indicate that it would have story significance if an artist was composing this image. Like, is this supposed to be Lex's tower? That's not what Lex's tower looks like. Can I zoom in? Not on this stuff. Oh, and water your plants. That's good. I was just going to say something like this. Superman's hand on the right has 8 fingers. It's not the worst, but this is some strange foreshortening. I can go with where the legs are, but this is a very, like, I would say that the forearm here should somehow be a little bigger and the bicep should be a little smaller. The foreshortening is very strange on this. And I think that that's something that AI, look, I don't know for a fact that Francesco Mattina used AI, but I see enough indications here to lead me to think probably, because who would draw this even in Photoshop and make this mistake on the symbol, right? Like, that's pretty weird. And beyond pretty weird, it's weird that he submitted this to DC and the DC approved it because this is in solicitations and stuff. If this was made with AI, folks, it has been held up in court multiple times that AI cannot be copyrighted, which would mean that technically this cover isn't like copyrighted. And you'd go, okay, but it's probably protected by trademark, right? Well, I don't know. You tell me. That's not really Superman's iconic Superman symbol that's trademarked. So is this trademark or copyright protected? I would say no. You say, is it public domain? I don't know what you could possibly do with it, but I would say that if DC kept putting out stuff like this in the future, they run the risk of being able to defend their trademarks and copyrights because they're not using them in a consistent manner. They're not protecting their own stuff. I'm disappointed when Mattina got accused of basically tracing a lot of other artists' work and photo bashing it together, Photoshop connecting it. Marvel cut ties with him, but DC's been like using a bunch of AI artists, it seems. Yeah, exactly. There's always my mother-in-law was recently sort of asking me about something she'd posted on Facebook, and I said that's AI. And she was like, how can you tell? And I was like, yeah, it's not like there's a hard and fast rule, but one thing I'll tell you is that it all has this weird, even lighting to it that isn't quite right. It's like the eye can sense it before you can enunciate what is wrong about it. Look, AI, DC, if I'm just trying to assume here, like to make sense of it, I'm assuming that this artist can work fast and cheap, and that they'll and here's the other thing that's sad, folks. So this has been posted on all sorts of places like Reddit and various news forums. There are tons of responses where people say, yeah, I don't care. It looks cool. I'm going to keep buying it. So I don't know. I don't like that it's taking from other artists for both opportunities as well as it's probably been trained on other artists without their consent. So I don't like it. But I'll say this. If Francesco comes out tomorrow with a step-by-step process of how he illustrated this and can prove that this is not AI and explain away why there are these strange things that I would call AI artifacts, I'd be happy to make a deep and sincere apology. But I think that this is AI. And it's lazy. I'll move on to a different story. I want to talk about this comic. It looked very interesting to me. A Black Label Plastic Man series. Black Label is basically, it's not DC's Vertigo per se, but it's where they put their more adult-oriented projects. It's called Plastic Man No More. It's going to be a 4-issue series by writer Christopher Cantwell, Eisner nominated, by the way, and artist Alex Linz. And it's going to look at what would happen if Eel O'Brien's powers started to fail. It's going to be 32 pages each, coming out first September 4th. So as Plastic Man starts dying, he's going to go on a mission to save his son, and obviously he has limited time. But let's hear what Christopher Cantwell has to say about this. He says, I don't know about you, but when I think about Plastic Man, I immediately think of David Cronenberg. Okay, you've got my attention. There is an element of body horror to this story that I have always found fascinating, and I also found myself wondering recently, how would Plastic Man actually die? What would that look like? Is he immortal? And then I thought of the long and particularly nasty way real plastics and petroleum products break down, and when and if they finally do. That's how I learned about depolymerization and the chemical process of unzipping. From a particularly morose afternoon on the old internet, picturing what might happen to Eel if his entire cellular structure started to give away. Oh, man. First of all, thank you, Jeannie. That's my sister making fun of me. I deserve it. That was a bad stutter. That's a kind of cool idea, folks. First of all, yeah, a story of Plastic Man trying to solve something while he's dying, like, sort of a final crime to solve. Cool. Sounds like a good plot. But then the specifics of turning it into body horror for Plastic Man, I'm sorry, that started to make a lot of sense to me. Cronenberg has done a lot of body horror movies and does them very well. What's the one he did with James Woods? Videodrome? Boy, that one's creepy. And then the idea of how we're dealing in our society now with microplastics. I read this disturbing news story about 2 weeks ago that almost every man on Earth has traces of microplastics in their semen now. That, like, it's stuff that's like gotten into our water. It's broken down into tiny little beads that we can barely see, and we drink it, and our body gathers it together somewhere. And for men, that's in our balls. I know you didn't expect me to talk about that, but that is a real news story that I read that we now have a certain amount of microplastics in all of us because it's just throughout our environment. It's just all this plastic breaking down into tinier and tinier little bits, but it's still plastic. And the idea of what would happen to Plastic Man if that started happening. Oh my God, that's so scary. It's a good idea for a Black Label series, in my opinion. Sorry. Oh yeah, it's in everybody. Plastic Ball Man. Yes, Videodrome. Thank you. Does this mean we can give birth to plastic action figures? Maybe in another 100 years. Yeah, maybe. David Cronenberg's Plastic Man. Oh my God, yes. Cronenberg's cool. For some reason, he is a recurring actor on the show Star Trek Discovery, just as like one of the Starfleet like scientists or something. And he walks around in a normal business suit. He's just an actor on that. But anyway, I like his movies a lot. We are all plastic men, though. No stretchiness. Speak for yourself. Watch this. How do you do this one again? Oh, okay. Ready? Woo! Look what I can do to my thumb. Stretch it right out. I don't know. All right. I'd make a terrible guy. Yes. Cameos in Jason X and Nightbreed. Does it? I haven't watched the final season. Maybe I should. Yep. Ripped it right off. I'm Plastic Man. Thought that was weird enough that I had to pass that on. Moving on. Marvel has launched a new logo. Folks, this is now the Marvel Comics logo. It's like Marvel Studios, but not quite as good. I don't love it. Yeah, I know. So, first of all, Marvel announced that they're moving their social media posts from just at Marvel to now it's going to be at Marvel Comics HQ. Much easier to remember, right? I don't know what's going on with this decision-making process. It's not the worst, but it's just not better, in my opinion. It's not better. Anyway, the new logo obviously mirrors the movie logo. I can understand the synergy there, and to like make something recognizable. Obviously, a lot more people have seen the Marvel Studios movies than have read the comics. So on that level, I will say that's decent marketing. But I will also say that on top of a cover right now, this rectangle doesn't work quite as good as a smaller, closer to a square. I think that this was good. For Marvel Studios, makes sense. A movie is on a rectangular, locked-in space. So you go across. But on a comic book, we're putting it, we're usually just putting it up here in the corner, even if it's like, Fantagraphics, if it's Image, whatever it is, it's just a little like area up here. And if you're going to like stretch it out, it just takes up more real estate. And I'm not sure if that's a great idea. I don't know. Oh, yeah. No, I was going to talk about that too. Yeah, that's weird too, because when it says Marvel Studios, the Studios is in like a thinner, very obviously different font. This is like, a logo chunk, and then it says Studios, and that's a second chunk. But this is like not the studio font, and it's not the same font as this. Because, yeah, look at the M here and the M here. Those are very different M's. And it doesn't look good like this because it's almost the same. It's blocky like this, but it's not quite the same. But the difference is this Marvel thing is not just a font. I forget the name of who designed it, but this is a logo font designer that tweaks things, like moves, makes specific decisions of how close these letters are going to be, and decides that, like, the bar for the A is going to be down here as compared to being even with like something like the E. He like makes decisions on like, where this, how much space is between. Like, that's a logo designer. And this, I think, is just a font. That's the difference. Marvel says their social media will now have weekly comic updates. They're going to talk to you about what's coming out on Wednesday. They're going to have reading recommendations, and they're going to have behind-the-scenes content. The behind-the-scenes content is a good idea. This is all good ideas for content. I just feel like that this logo feels like an afterthought, not a fully formed idea. I just don't understand. I don't get it. You couldn't have made really comics. You couldn't have put it together quite the same as this, because Marvel, they found a way to make this that connects on almost every letter. You couldn't with the L, but like it's still very close. But there's more space between the C and the O and the O and the M than there is between the E and the L. So it's not the same font. It doesn't look good to me. It doesn't look good. It's so close in terms of a blocky font, but it's not the same, and it messes with my eyes. What's my favorite font? Probably something simple, like copperplate, Gothic bold. I just think it looks nice. That's what I use for like these headers up here. I like that. I don't know. It wouldn't look good on everything, but it's a font I like. Other than that, Arial, Times. I'm a simple guy. Unless I've got a really good idea to use like a special font, I just try to stick to 2 or 3 fonts. I try not to like, and certainly when I've got like a product, I try never to have more than 3 fonts total on like, like on a cover or something. You'd never want more than 3 fonts. And one of them is going to be the logo. But if you have like after the logo, you have like, a word balloon, like blurb, I should say, like, a starburst saying like, in this issue, Optimus Prime dies. And then you also had like, a font of like some dialogue. That would be like 3 fonts. You don't want to use more than that for like other text. It just gets messy. It looks awful. Going to stay with some Marvel news. And folks, is the Blade movie, is it just cursed? It might be. It might just be. Jan Demange. Jan Demange was the director of Blade, and this week, on the 12th, he became the second director to leave this movie. The second director to leave. It just... And I don't think it was like, I think it's just that they just are taking too long. No, Optimus Prime doesn't really die. I was just pretending that was a blurb. Eric Pearson, by the way, has joined as a new screenwriter. And Eric Pearson's a fine screenwriter, but that also makes the 6th person to write this movie. And I don't know, folks. I don't think writing Blade should be a very hard thing to do. It's very strange. They should call it that at this point. They should call it Curse of the Blade. And that would at least take the edge off. This was originally announced in 2019, and they didn't say that they were going to make it in 2019, but I'm sure that they did not expect it to be 5 years. To be fair, to be somewhat fair to the movie, they did encounter the pandemic, and they had both a writers and a director's strike, right? Writers and directors, I believe. So those are three things that delayed a lot of projects. Blade definitely got hit like right in the face, full force with all of those. All of them affected this movie specifically. But it's just taken too long to get this movie made. They got a good actor. They announced in 2019, Mahershala Ali. He had just won an Oscar for Moonlight. Great actor. Great actor. This is so crazy. Wesley Snipes, the original guy to play Blade, he kind of had some fun with this. On Twitter, he said, Blade, lordy, lordy, lordy. Folks still looking for the secret sauce. Riding snowmobiles in traffic. Kind of rough. Daywalkers made it look easy, don't they? He's just teasing them. But then this one was a little weird. The star, Mahershala Ali, his lawyer was talking to the Hollywood Reporter, and she said, that deal was in 2019 and they still haven't shot it, which is pretty much the craziest thing in my professional experience. That's the kind of thing your lawyer says when you're about 2 steps from leaving the building, you know? Look, nobody hires Wesley for his writing abilities. I think we get what he's going for. But anyway, yeah. I want them to be able to make a good Blade movie with Mahershala Ali, if they can, because that's a good actor. That's a damn good actor. And Blade should not be that hard of a movie to make. Keep it small. Pretend like it doesn't have to connect to everything else. Just give us a good vampire hunting movie. And then have a few strands that say that it's in a bigger world. Easy. Maybe he runs around the movie with a sword, and at the end you find out he's been borrowing the ebony blade from Black Knight. You know, something small to connect it to the rest as a starting point. But come on, vampires are cool, and they shouldn't be that hard. There have been so many good vampire hunting pieces of fiction. From, movies that focus more on Van Helsing than Dracula, to Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the Blade movies with Wesley Snipes, Captain Kronos, the Hammer horror movie. There's so many good vampire hunting things to look at for a roadmap. Wow. That's a good point. This is also a movie that should not cost $200 million. I would say you could make a damn good action-packed Blade movie for like $80 million. And that's totally reasonable for an MCU movie. But who am I? Werewolf by Night was directed by composer Michael Giacchino, and I think he did a great job. Oh my God, I hate getting those recommendations when I'm scrolling through YouTube. 1950s Panovision style. I'm like, I don't give a shit what your AI makes Iron Man and Nick Fury look like. I hate those. But anyway. Part of the reason Godzilla -1 could work at such a low budget, though, was its specifics. For instance, it was directed by a guy who has been a special effects producer, right? Those people know how to plan ahead and how to make the most and to plan properly to get the most out of their special effects. So I would strongly consider looking more to people that have experience in the industry as, say, the best stunt coordinator or the best special effects coordinator, and give them the opportunities to become directors. Yeah. Just crazy to me, though. Yeah, lost its second director already. Here's something that's light and fun. Deathlok. Deathlok, believe it or not, is somehow 50 years old, which is a huge number in some ways. But Deathlok does not feel like a really old character. Maybe it's because he's not overexposed like, say, a Spider-Man or Batman. But in September, Marvel's going to celebrate Deathlok's 50th anniversary with a one-shot written by Christopher Priest and Justina Ireland. Those are some quality writers. Sounds good to me. A bunch of artists are going to be on the book, but one that I wanted to point out was Dennis Cohen coming back. And Dennis drew Deathlok in the 90s. There have been more than one person that has been Deathlok, to be clear. In the 1990s, there was a Deathlok series that was set in the modern day. The original Deathlok was set in the far future of 1990. Keep in mind, it came out in 74. But the one that came out in the 90s was a really interesting story about a pacifist scientist who got betrayed by his company, and his brain and like undead, zombie body got put into like this cyborg contraption built for war, and how he tried to. I like the 90s Deathlok series. Deathlok needs a movie. Yes, we'll give it a $300 million budget, and you'll see it in 7 years. The anniversary special features the original Deathlok. That was Colonel Luther Manning. He was a soldier in the future who basically dies and is reanimated as a cyborg. In a way, kind of the Universal Soldier story before that movie ever existed. Justina Ireland, by the way, one of the co-writers on this, is a former service member. She's also a novelist and has written comics. But she was trained in the army as a translator. She was an Arabic translator. So I think that having that military background could actually serve the character of Luther Manning quite well. Because to the best of my knowledge, I don't think he's ever had like an ongoing series writer that has been a service member. And I think that would actually be valuable background to inform the character. Yeah, again, I think the Dwayne McDuffie, Dennis Cohen, Deathlok is an underrated 1990s comic. Underrated. Marvel has shared what the next version of the Sinister Six is. Classic Spider-Man enemy, a group of 6 bad guys. The original was formed by Dr. Octopus and had Mysterio, Kraven, Sandman, Electro, and Vulture. But this is in the Ultimate Universe. So Marvel released a variant cover here and solicitations for the upcoming second story arc for Ultimate Spider-Man. I think issue 6 comes out either later this month or early next month, and that will wrap up the first story arc. And then issues 7, 8, 9 will be about the crime-fighting duo of Spider-Man and Green Goblin going up against Kingpin. And he's assembled this as his version of Sinister Six. We've got Kingpin, Mysterio, Kraven, Mr. Negative, Mole Man, traditionally a Fantastic Four enemy, and Black Cat. Well, Black Cat has been a Spider-Man enemy, but typically it's Felicia Hardy, who also becomes a romantic interest. But this Black Cat looks a lot more like Black Fox, who's an older gentleman cat burglar, because he had a mustache and But anyway, yeah, some sort of revamp there. Pretty weird. Everyone gets facial hair. Not Kingpin. Do you think that being bald, Kingpin just decided to hire like maybe 5 guys that all have like mustaches and beards and stuff? He's making up for something. He's making up for something. Could certainly be Felicia Hardy's dad, depending on how old this character is. Could certainly be. Don't know much more. Just showing that this is what's going to be the second arc, is he's going to go up against some supervillains, and it's a very different group than we've seen before. We have to imagine that there's a beard under there. We have to use our imaginations. Marvel has canceled their Iron Man title. A little surprising, but then again, we live in an age where books get rebooted every week. So this month is issue 20 of Invincible Iron Man, and that will be the final issue of the run by writer Jerry Duggan. No further issues solicited. No word on when, or even if, but when there will be a new issue number 1 and who the next creative team is. But yeah, this is going to wrap up the current Iron Man story. Solicitations for this issue indicate that it's also going to wrap up Tony Stark's marriage to Emma Frost. That was something they really honestly only did as a matter of convenience to sort of battle some X-Men enemies that Iron Man was helping out with. Marvel sort of promoted it like it was a big deal, like, hey, it's a wedding, but it was always just a tool for these two. It wasn't like a big romance that had built up. Anyway. Who will I want to see in the title? Iron Man. Immortal Iron Man? I'd give it a chance. Yeah, exactly. It's wrapping up because Iron Man has been pretty involved with some of the X-Men stuff for quite a while. So it does sort of make sense as an ending point. But it is also weird to me that they reboot things so quickly. Anyway. Celebrity marriages, they never last. The Boys, an adaptation of a comic book. And in my opinion, I've said this before, I think that the TV show is a lot better than the comic. I think it's one of those rare occasions where it's found ways to improve. But yeah. Tony Stark quitting Stark Industries to become a podcaster. Yes, well, that's where all the attention and the money is, doing this kind of stuff, just to be clear. But The Boys is planning its end, which is sort of a big deal because this is one of the most popular shows Amazon has, and probably for how popular it is, the most cost efficient, because their most popular show is like $1 billion show, Rings of Power. It's crazy how much it cost. Anyway, the first 3 episodes of season 4 of The Boys debuted this week. They put the first 3 out all at once. And the showrunner, Eric Kripke, guy I really admire, he's announced that season 5 has been ordered and that that's going to be the final season. But I think 5 seasons is a good amount of seasons for a TV show. That makes sense. It will probably realistically get some spin-offs to keep the idea going, but it's going to wrap up its main story with 1 more season. Kripke said that he hasn't written the final episode yet, but that he definitely knows where everyone will end up in the end. He says he's had that mapped out for quite a while, and so like season 5 was where it made sense. And it also makes sense when you consider, even though it's diverged and isn't the same as the comic, it still takes certain characters or story beats from the comics, and they're out of most of them. You know, there's not much left. There's not a lot left. The Animated Boys anthology show is called something with a D, like Devious or Deviant. Maybe, I think Devious. Diabolical. Thank you. Diabolical. That was fast. So Kripke was interviewed by Slash Film, and I'm just passing on this quote. Obviously, we deviate quite far. The comic book's amazing. It's a beautiful piece of art, but what I'm making is my interpretation of how the comic book makes me feel. That's fair. The comic was very much a satire of comic book superheroes in comic book history, whereas the show uses superheroes to satirize celebrity culture and the current politics of the world. And it's never tried to be subtle. It's a very unsubtle show, but I find it very entertaining. I like it. So yeah, I'm curious. Some people, by the way, have said that they thought season 4, they were wondering if they recast the actor who plays Mother's Milk. And I just want to say, no, that's still actor Laz Alonso. He just, first of all, shaved his beard and mustache, and second, he slimmed down. The guy, if you've seen him in anything before, he's done a lot of things. He's a consistently working actor. He looks like he pretty much always had. For the first 3 seasons, he bulked up, like put on something like 50 pounds. He really buffed up, but that's got to be hard to keep all that extra muscle on for like such a long time. So, I think that they basically just let him go back to his normal self. And it's fine at this point. It's fine. The biggest change, sincerely, is probably just that he shaved. That's what's funny to me. The audience score is 52% because it's too political. I don't feel like it ever hid its politics from the beginning. I really don't. But whatever. I like it. I'm glad I get it. Sorry if some people don't like it. Yeah, and I appreciate what Garth Ennis did with that. I sincerely do. I just happen to enjoy the TV versions take a little bit more, but I do appreciate what Garth and Derek Robertson did with the Boys comic. I do. They did it. It was a good idea, worthy of exploration. Oh, is anybody else watching it? I've got one thing to say about the Boys, and it's not really a spoiler, but I want to talk about one of the characters on it. There's a new character this year called Sage, and her power is that she's super smart. And she is super smart. Episode 3 ended with something that was like confusing some people. Like there was some blood on like her living room table, and she's watching Transformers and basically making out with a guy, and they're like, what's going on here? I don't know if they're going to explicitly say this, but my take on it is that as the smartest person in the world, I think sometimes she needs to decompress. I think that she literally jabs something into her ear and mixes up her brain and lets herself be dumb for the night, and that her superpower is her brain heals itself. I think that that's what she does, is that she lobotomizes herself to get a break. Anyway. Oh, did she play Dina Pilgrim on Powers? Oh, that's interesting. Huh. Wow. Yes, I do like that. Like Homelander keeps calling her the smartest woman in the world, and she's like, smartest person. Let's get it right. Anyway. It's a good show, in my opinion. Folks, Metro Boomin isn't just about being in rap beefs. Metro Boomin made a comic. Celebrity Comics. Let's see. So Metro Boomin, if you don't know, a rapper, did an album called Heroes and Villains, but also in the more comic book world was one of the executive producers on the Across the Spider-Verse soundtrack. That was something comic book related. Anyway, he's created a Metroverse comic book. I don't expect everybody to know who this is, but it's a celebrity making a comic. It's described, his comic is, as a superhero saga and also a visual interpretation of Metro's musical journey with art by Vasilis Lolos. That's a Greek artist who previously did visuals on My Chemical Romance's Danger Days, The True Lives of the Fabulous Killjoys. Obviously, there's some Kirby influence in there. I think it's a cool art style anyway. Is he just a producer? I'm not an expert. I don't know. It's limited to 4,000 copies. If it's your thing and you're curious, it's available on his site. There were also 300 signed versions, but sorry, folks, they sold out. Yes, I knew that he had done beats for guys like Drake and Kanye and stuff. I guess I thought that he also rapped. I'm sorry that I got that wrong. Whoops. The Riddler comic book was actually really good, so they're not always bad. Also, Bruce Campbell last year wrote the Sergeant Rock versus Zombies book. That was really good, actually. And I will say that as far as celebrities writing comics, Berserker's okay. That's the Keanu Reeves one. That was okay. But I think one that's pretty darn good is Iman Vellani's work writing the last two Ms. Marvel series. I think she's doing a pretty good job there. So, yeah. I thought this was cool. Who's this guy? That's Christian Cooper, and he just won an Emmy. Christian Cooper used to work in comics. That's why I'm talking about it. So, former editor and writer at Marvel, Christian Cooper. He became famous in 2020. You probably heard about this when a video went viral. He was bird watching in Central Park, and basically this lady got really mad at him for asking her to put her dog on a leash. It was in an area where you're supposed to have your dogs leashed. And she called the police, said that there's an African-American man threatening me, which is very dangerous to do, folks. You don't say things like that to the police without potential consequences. So that lady lost her job, I think. But Christian Cooper kind of got an opportunity out of that. He was offered his own National Geographic show on birding. And it's called Extraordinary Birder with Christian Cooper. Well, this past weekend, he actually won an Emmy for Outstanding Daytime Personality, Non-Daily. So yeah, he won as best for being the host. So that's kind of cool. But what's his comics background, in case you don't know? I'll just share some of this. He was Marvel Comics' first openly gay writer and editor, and he created Star Trek's first gay character for Starfleet Academy. For Marvel at the time was doing the Star Trek comics. Another thing that's pretty important, he was associate editor on Alpha Flight issue 106. That was the issue where North Star came out as gay. And he had been coded gay for a while, but that's when it actually happened. So yeah, an openly gay man. It's Pride Month. He got an Emmy. He worked in comics. I thought I'd share it. He seems like a nice, charming guy. I've only ever heard nice things said about him by other comics pros. So I think that that's kind of cool, that that's something he's really into, is bird watching. And he's been able to get, he wrote a book about it, and he's got a show about bird watching. It's something he loves. I love bird watching. Good for him. Yeah. I have a friend who's huge into bird watching, and she adores this show. What pride are you? What's that, like a lion joke or something? I don't know. Anyway, good for him. I just thought that was kind of, for him, I think it's a happy piece of news. And he did some good stuff in comics. Relatively brief run, but in comics before he moved on to other things. But did some good stuff. I have not heard about Rick Remender's new comics somehow. All right. What else? We got two more pieces of news here. This is kind of quick, but Something is Killing the Children is getting a prequel comic. It's going to celebrate the 5th anniversary of Something is Killing the Children. Obviously been a hugely successful comic. 40 issues by writer James Tynion IV and Werther Deladera, the artist, and together they're teaming up to release a prequel issue number 0 this September. It's going to recount Erica Slaughter's epic battle that took place just before we first meet her in issue 1 of Something is Killing the Children. She apparently went through some sort of huge epic battle against an interesting monster. Issue 1 featured her stumbling out of the woods, all sort of beaten up, but had like killed something. And this is going to explain what that was. The creators promised that it's going to be an epic story and it's going to help us understand. It's going to flesh out Erica's background. Could be a lot of fun. I like this book. I like it quite a bit. Last piece of news I'll have, just a happy thing here too. A bunch of artists, quite a bunch, raised some money for the Brazil flood victims this past week. So what did they do? On Tuesday, Heroes for Brazil was an auction event that took place on Twitter, and it raised money for flood victims in Brazil with over 80 original art pieces donated by artists. Some of those included Frank Miller did a commission that went for $6,500. Jamie Hewlett doesn't do many, went for $3,300. Jim Lee picked up another $5,000, and that's just 3 of like the 80 people involved. If you don't know about this, I thought I'd also just try to highlight and bring this to people's attention that Brazil needs help right now. They have had massive, massive rainstorms. Basically, climatologists say that it's definitely part of climate change. And the state of Rio Grande do Sul specifically has been hit with massive floods. Over 150 people have died so far, and over 100 are still missing. So things are tough for Brazil, and their people need some help. Thank you for the super chat, Joshua. Wow, thank you. Tynion was a Scott Snyder understudy. Yes, they have a lot of similarity in their libraries, but who do you gravitate more towards? I don't really like to choose. I probably have read a few more Scott Snyder things, but I'm not 100% sure. I like them both. They're both really solid writers. They both have done a bunch in horror, and I like horror. And they've had original ideas there, but they're also both very good at dialogue. I think that's a strong suit. Anyway, yeah. Tynion did do Blue Book. Yeah, that's. Does that say full body pencils? Oh yeah, I guess it does. You're right. There is a typo on it. Full body pencils. Well, it still went for 6,500, so that's nice. Yeah, I know. Brazil's having a tough time. So that was what I had for news. Let me close that out, and I need to just swap a few cords here so that I can bring up a camera of the comics that I got this week. I'd love to talk in depth about a few of the comics that I read this week, and maybe that lines up with some of the comics that you read this week. I don't know. The only way I'll know is if I talk to you about it. Present, extra camera. Okay, let me adjust this a little. I'm just, I always have to play with the focus on this each time I set it up. I could set it up and then just leave it on, but then I'm always worried about the battery running out. Okay. Let me zoom out a little bit from that. That's yeah. Maybe like, there we go. Let me adjust some things. Thank you, folks. I know that always takes a few awkward minutes. I'm the one that makes them awkward. let's talk about Transformers just briefly. I don't know that I necessarily have something different to say for issue 9 than I did for issues 1 through 8. But what I will say is this continues to be an excellent book. Just excellent. The pacing, the dialogue, the characterizations, really strong point. And it keeps finding new ways to escalate the stakes. That probably helps that with so many characters, Daniel Warren Johnson and Jorge Garcia Jorge Corona can always kill off or add new characters. But we've got a really nice core here. And what happens in this is the Decepticons escalate things by opening a bridge back to their home planet of Cybertron, and they introduce Shockwave. And Shockwave has always been a very competent military leader in Transformers fiction. He was entrusted by Megatron to rule the entire planet of Cybertron while he was gone. So basically, very, very powerful. And one of the fun things in this one, this part isn't fun, but he does shoot Ratchet in the chest, and Ratchet is dying. That's pretty huge. There's a bunch of great character work with so many different characters, but I liked this. Shockwave gives Optimus Prime a pile driver. We're back to doing some pro wrestling moves, which work surprisingly well with giant robots. Look, he picks him up over his head, and he just slams Optimus Prime down on his head and neck. It's great. It's devastating, too. But what was really surprising in this wasn't just seeing the stakes of things like the Transformers were in so much trouble that they had to leave behind, I guess it's Jazz and Cliffjumper. They had to abandon them because otherwise they were all going to die. But it's that Spike, this is what surprised me. Spike is getting abducted by Astrotrain, and somebody breaks into Astrotrain to rescue him. Beachcomber, excuse me, but unless you were a guy who bought the toys back then, there's no way you knew who Beachcomber was. That is definitely an obscure pull. But what I like is that that Daniel keeps doing unexpected things like this. I'm sorry, but I did not expect Shockwave to deliver a pile driver to Optimus Prime and have him like knocked out for several pages, which basically puts the Autobots in a terrible position. And I did not expect Beachcomber, of all people, to show up and rescue Spike. I've read the next issue because I get preview stuff from publishers. Let's just say, I can't wait till you guys get a chance to read this because Beachcomber has a heck of an interesting story. A really interesting story. Why he is here and how he is able to rescue Spike. It's just amazing. So, yeah. Yep. Sorry, here. Let me highlight this comic. Beachcomber G1 episode. I don't remember his episode very well. He was a little guy like Bumblebee. Yep, he was one of the little cars, and I love those mini cars. Keep in mind, I was young, and now as an adult, I'm like, give me the biggest Transformer possible. That's what looks cool. But back when I was a kid, Bumblebee, Windcharger, Huffer, Pipes, Brawn, those were the guys that I just loved. They were simple transformations, and I did love more complex transformations as a little kid, but I loved how cute the little ones were. I was surprised to see Beachcomber make an appearance in this book and to have an important role. So good for them for like using characters that we wouldn't expect, find a way to give them an interesting story, because you know what? There's so many characters that aren't well explored or defined. You may as well write a new personality and backstory to these characters. It's great. It's great. Yeah, Huffer. Huffer was a tiny little orange truck that was basically the same kind of truck as Optimus Prime was, but he was like an eighth of the size. It didn't make any sense. The scale of Transformers, the toys, made no sense. And that's because it was taken from about 3 different toy lines when they brought them here to America. if I include stuff like Jetfire. It was like 3 different toy lines. Speaking of things from the past, because Transformers was kind of an 80s property, Hate. Hate was an underground comic that came out in the 90s and was very much about slacker culture in Seattle in the 90s. Buddy Bradley, and the people around him, like his girlfriend Lisa, his friend Valerie, his friend Stinky. Well, Hate has come back. Hate has been gone for a long time, but Peter Baggy has brought it back. And what he does is he gives us a few stories that are set in the past, like in that original era, and just sort of fleshes out some of the backstories of the characters. And in the part that like interests me the most, we get stuff set in the modern day when Buddy now has to be an adult with responsibilities like, you know, paying a mortgage and having a job and stuff like that. What does a 90s slacker become as an adult? Still kind of the same person, but like has gone through a lot of life and, you know, has dinner parties that he wants to get out of. This is a funny comic. It's interesting. Like I used to find this very subversive, and I wouldn't say the modern stuff is as subversive, but I would still say it's funny. But the stuff that's in the past, I mean, this says Renton, Washington, 1991. That was so long ago, but Renton is literally like the town just about next to me. It's crazy. I have a Monday ritual. Bag up comics while watching your stream to get ready for the next weekend show. It's great. Please support Chris's Patreon. Thank you, Sigma Comics. I appreciate support like that a lot. Thank you very, very much. Thank you. Oh, that's an interesting comment that ChemDog has about what we were just talking about, Transformers. In this book, Thundercracker, I guess that was done by the same voice actor as Huffer, who I'd mentioned. But in this, Thundercracker seems to really be becoming disenfranchised with how cruel the other Decepticons are. So that'll be an interesting evolution for that. I think Thundercracker is going to switch sides. We'll see. Chris, I remember seeing a nice joke about Seattle in this issue. Look, it is very much about like, you know, the Seattle scene, but I don't know. This past week, I had some friends visit from DC. I met like 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I met eight friends from DC who happened to visit, and we went to like the Space Needle and some other Seattle-y things. And it was interesting to see Seattle again with fresh eyes because I've been here for 10 years. We went to the Museum of Pop Culture, and they have a really amazing Nirvana exhibit. And in a way, that was a kind of a brief era, the grunge era of alternative music. Kind of like 88 to maybe 94. Like, I would call it those 6 years, which is kind of brief. And then there was an alternative era, but like that was an interesting era. And it was really like something that came out of this Seattle and Washington or Pacific Northwest area. So I don't know. It was interesting to get to read this comic at the same time that I got to see that exhibit. All of this happened within a week, and just sort of like remember that Seattle has a really interesting history when it comes to late 80s, early 90s. But yeah, like now Buddy lives down in Tacoma. That's where I lived when I first lived. Yeah, Patreon is probably what helps me the most. Anyway. I know you are, and I appreciate it. Yeah, the Melvins. You know, it was funny to go to like the exhibit and be reminded that all of these bands that I'd sort of forgotten had come from this area, like Mudhoney and Alice in Chains. But that's all like part of this culture too. And I understand that Hate Revisited is going to also sort of give us the story of like how Buddy's friend Stinky died back then. But yeah, Tad. Yep, Tad. Cool. So a bunch of you guys do know the sort of the grunge era bands. That's really cool. It was fun. It was really fun to see some old friends again, and also just sort of re-experience Seattle history. But Hate is very funny. Hate is very funny, folks. It's got some unlikable characters. So if you like, people that are underachievers or are annoying and you just want to see what their daily lives are, these aren't people solving anything big. Sometimes it's like, even the back cover, by the way, is used. Every single page of this is used. There's no ads. The back cover is a one-page strip where Buddy's wife, Lisa, is getting mad at him because apparently he has never actually voted for a candidate, and she's like mad at him for wasting his vote, and it's just so funny. So I do recommend it. I do like an unlikable character. Met most of those bands. You met Kurt Cobain and Christ Novoselic. That's amazing. Sub Pop. Yeah, while I was there this past week, I did get to see the original 1988 contract between Sub Pop Records and Nirvana. That was pretty cool. That's a nice little piece of history. It's just a one-page contract, but that was definitely what got Nirvana on a path, and then they just skyrocketed to success. I mean, 3 albums. That's not many. It's not many. What else was good this week was Ultimate X-Men. Ultimate X-Men. Last time I did this, I talked about the pacing of it all. Okay? Last time I talked about how Peach paces this book like manga, which is slower and deliberate, a very deliberate pacing. But I think it really helps you connect to the characters when you slow the story down. What I am starting to find interesting about this, as we get introduced to more and more mutant characters, is, and I didn't see this coming, maybe this is naive, she's up to something like 4 or 5 female Japanese X-Men characters that have all been in the regular books but are now getting like re-envisioned. The main one is Armor, and her best friend is Maystorm, but we've also met Nico Minoru, Sister Grimm. We've met Surge, and apparently we're going to meet Psylocke or Quanon, but we'll see. I think that overall, Ultimate X-Men is my favorite of the Ultimate relaunch. I like Spider-Man, but I really like Ultimate X-Men. I think it's the most different, and that's what I want out of the Ultimate line, is to give me something newer and different. She's going up against, I think, their version of the Shadow King, and the idea that he's somebody that like is a bully but hates bullies, and it deals with like, kids in high school that like were bullied to the extent that they felt the need to unalive themselves. It feels very relevant to today. Like the big action beat in this one is sort of that Armor is attacked, but also sort of that Maystorm uses her storm powers to fry out everybody's cell phones so that they can't record this sort of mutant stuff that's going on. But the video does get out. Somebody's phone did record it. And who would that be? That would be Surge. Surge is a mutant who always absorbed electricity. So basically her phone was protected and she recorded some mutant stuff going on. But why would she put that out there when she's a mutant herself? I don't know. These are some very interesting characters. And again, I just love what Zach Davison and Peach Momoko are doing with the last page of every issue to give us something about Japanese culture or history. And in this case, they're talking about the motorcycle that the main character, Hisako, rides. It's specifically a 1980s Honda Raccoon. And that was like a bike that became very popular in Japan in the 1980s because it was a very small engine. It was like a 50cc engine or something like that. And so it got nicknamed the Harajuku bike. But I didn't know that history, actually. And that's always fun to like learn a little bit of actual history. This is all set in Japan. And so it's something different. It really is. Have Punisher, Daredevil, Moon Knight shown up in this universe yet? No, no, and no. However, Khonshu is part of the Ultimate Black Panther. In that one, the gods of Ra and Khonshu rule Africa. Psylocke, can't wait to see her version of that character. Will she be in high school? Maybe Ninja High School? I don't know. All I know is that there's a future cover that indicates Psylocke is going to be on it. Yeah, it's just so cool though that like Peach is slowly gathering these characters. They're not a team yet. That's okay. I'm getting to know them as characters. And I really like Hisako armor. I also like that her armor isn't just generic armor anymore, that it's specifically a samurai. Actually a samurai with sort of like an Oni type of a face. Like that's really interesting. I hadn't even considered something like that. But you know what? Yeah, maybe Big Hero 6 or at least Sunfire. Sunfire is probably Marvel's first Japanese superhero, right? Yes, exactly. Matt Murdock did have a small scene in Ultimate Spider-Man, but we don't know if he's Daredevil or anything. Look, the pacing on this isn't going to be for everybody, and while Peach Momoko's covers sell out, I could also understand if her art style isn't for everyone. I mean, it's certainly from time to time way more cartoony than what we get in most superhero books. But for me, what I like about it is that it is still a superhero book about, you know, concepts that I like, but it's new and it's fresh, and it really makes the world of X-Men again seem young, and it makes them seem like outsiders. I think that that's really important. Wearing a motorcycle is not unprecedented. Oh, okay. So I didn't make a mistake. Sunfire is in this new Ultimate Universe. Is he? I don't remember coming across him yet. But, you know, Silver Samurai and Sunfire are both really important Japanese mutants. Oh, yeah. I like her painted colors, too. I'm glad that other people like it. I hope that this is doing well, because out of the Ultimate books, I do find Spider-Man interesting, but I find Ultimate X-Men the most satisfying read so far. Because I don't feel like it's trying to do too much. I feel like Spider-Man feels like it's got a lot of characters to introduce and a lot of concepts, because Spider-Man has had so many important supporting characters over the years. So even if they're like just a short introduction, it feels like they're trying to introduce so much, plus they've got to like have some connective tissue to the bigger world. Ultimate X-Men is so much less concerned about all that. You know, it's issue 4. We haven't even had a hint of Magneto, Professor X, Wolverine, and that's fine. That's totally fine. I like it. The last thing I want to talk about that I really, really liked, there's a couple that I read that I didn't really like, but the last one I really liked was Fantastic Four. So it's issue 21, and I've told you before that what I really like about writer Ryan North's run has been that it's mostly been single issue, 1 or 2, had like 2 issue stories, but it's always just like a single issue mystery, like science fiction mystery for the team to solve. And it's mostly about getting to know the family, getting to know them as people. And I like that. Well, this one is a Blood Hunt crossover that doesn't feel like a crossover. It's still a completely satisfying, self-contained story. It just involves Reed Richards and Alicia Masters Grimm, the Thing's wife, going to New York to look at art. Alicia is an artist. There's like a new sort of 3D sculpture series that she wanted to see. And Reed's talking about how he's never felt like a creative person and he doesn't have an emotional connection to art. And Alicia's like arguing, like, you know, you're not letting yourself, but here's how you could. Here's how you could have a connection. You know, it's about free association and letting go. And he's like, boy, that just sounds, you know, like non-deterministic. And she's like, yeah. But then all of a sudden the skies are covered in darkness and vampires start attacking. And of course, Reed is not going to believe, despite, like, you know, having met Ghost Rider and stuff like that, he's not going to believe in vampires. But she's like, yeah, but you can believe in them, like, sort of looking and acting just like vampires, right? And he's like, yeah, okay. So the vampires can't bite through Reed's stretchy skin. And Alicia is like, well, what if you just stretched over a whole building? Maybe we, and so he stretches himself over the boundaries of the art museum, and that allows people to come in and they can't get bitten by the vampires. Now, they don't know how to contact anyone. They don't know how to beat the vampires yet. And Reed's kind of stuck here, right? And the people are stuck in. So their problem is, how do they save people? How do they get to somewhere safer? And basically, it involves some creative thinking. Reed forms a tube from one building to a place where there would be a bunch of lights that he could work with, Madison Square Garden. He's able to engineer the lights to emit UV radiation and sort of create a safe haven for at least a little while, but they still can't connect with anybody else. So it gives us something character-based, even though it's technically like a crossover. We don't have to be like, oh, the Avengers are fighting Blade, and Miles Morales just turned into a vampire, and Doctor Strange is cut in half. You know, like, it doesn't concern itself with any of that. It uses the fact that Marvel currently has vampires attacking New York to focus on two characters and how they solve a unique problem. I loved it. I don't know, like probably in the last writer's story arc, but it's been a little while. I turned myself into a building, Morty. Fantastic Four stories are all about family. That's my Vin Diesel. I liked it. It's going to probably continue with some more vampire stuff in the next issue because their solution is a short-term one, but it's great. And by the way, Alex Ross is doing some of the best work of his career. Let me show you this. They show you what the cover for the next issue is. Look at that. Vampires biting Reed's stretchy body. And I think that looks fantastic. I think that's one of the best looking covers Alex Ross has ever painted. It's such a good mix of realism versus something absurd. Just look at the details of how he drew the inner lip. I'm sorry, but this is really, really good. This is a great cover. I think that this is going to sell well. I think that they might literally see a bump from like whatever they sell from issue 21 to issue 22 based on that cover. That is a good ass cover. He doesn't technically have bones. He's just all stretchable. He's just all stretchable. He doesn't really have... I think he still has his internal organs. I don't think he technically has bones. I don't know. His anatomy changed when he got blasted by cosmic radiation. I want to talk about some writing that really confused the hell out of me with Get Fury issue 2. And I like the premise of this book. It's Garth Ennis writing The Punisher again and Nick Fury, two characters he's done some great stories with. It's a Max comic, so that's not in the main continuity per se. It's way more, it's adult. They can say whatever they want, you know. Explicit content. You've got this tiny little red thing here that says explicit content. Here's what confused me. So last issue, the premise was the CIA hired Marine Frank Castle to kill Nick Fury because Nick Fury had been captured behind enemy lines during the Vietnam conflict by North Vietnamese army. And the CIA feels that Nick Fury knows too many secrets. So the best solution is to send in, their best Marine, Captain Frank Castle. One day he will become the Punisher and kill Fury. Okay, that's the premise. But in this, we learn that the real motivations of the CIA and one army general is that they have been secretly bringing drugs back from Vietnam, sewed up in the bodies of dead service members that are returning home. They're running a drug smuggling ring, and they believe that Nick Fury knows about that, and that's why they've sent Frank Castle. I keep wanting to call him the Punisher, but Frank Castle to kill him. Here's what's utterly bizarre. This is as you can see, several pages of them talking back and forth about plot stuff, right? Let me get back to that. They talk about all this stuff they've got, and they get nervous because they realize they've made a mistake on the mission. I had to read this 3 times to understand what was going on, because they're talking about this smuggling operation that we never actually see. We didn't see it in issue 1. We don't actually see it in issue 2. They just talk about it here. They talk about some CIA operatives that had been killed. We never saw them get killed by anyone. We don't know about this. They're talking about it. And they're talking about their mistakes on what they assumed Nick Fury knew, and so on. Utterly confusing. I'm going to lay it out for you because I was so confused. I had to keep reading it and finally found out. I think that basically Frank Castle actually figured out that these CIA guys were smuggling drugs and killed them and left them behind a brothel to maybe make it seem like these guys had just gotten into a fight in a bad section of town, right? But what the CIA and Army guy know is that these CIA operatives happen to be gay, so there would be no reason for them to be at the brothel. And they assumed Nick Fury did it. But then they're realizing that Nick Fury would have known, he knew that they were gay, so he wouldn't have put them there. And they're realizing that basically they've sent a guy who's onto their drug running scheme to kill Fury. So he probably would not be inclined to kill Fury. Instead, he's probably going to track down the drug smugglers. I think. This is what I got after going back and forth on this dialogue, because I get it. Look, you're trying to come in. It's called in media res. The story's already going on, right? And you're trying to shift around with different dialogue and hint at something that's happened. It could work. In this case, it's utterly confusing. They're talking back and forth about stuff that we haven't seen happen. It's really confusing. It's so confusing. I think I have it right, because it makes sense to me on a thematic level that this story would turn into the Punisher going after drug smugglers, or have a reason not to like drug smugglers, right? Because that's kind of Punisher's deal, is going after criminals. But it's so confusing, folks. I think I've got it right, but again, I read through it 3 times and I'm still not sure. There's some stuff in it that's okay. For instance, Frank Castle does get dropped off behind enemy lines. And so what he does is he pretends to be Soviet. He talks in Russian. And so the locals would think, okay, he's an ally. He's here as an advisor, because if you don't know, Vietnam was a proxy war. They don't really explain that in this. You have to know your history. It's at least 6 or 7 pages of exposition to lay this out. Great writers always tell, don't show. I get it. He's trying to create sort of a mystery plot. I get why he's doing it. He's trying to tell it in an interesting way. But this is something that might have worked in live action, like a TV show or a movie, and is utterly confusing as a comic book because they kept saying like he knew this, he didn't know that, and I'm serious when they're saying like he, and I'm going like, wait, who knew what? I'm like, why does it matter that they're gay? Oh, okay, wait, okay, because a gay, whoever killed them, if they left them behind a brothel, that meant that they didn't know that they were gay. I'm like, was that who knows that? Nick Fury? Oh, wait, maybe they mean Frank Castle. I had to read it so many times. I think I've got it right, but I'll be honest, I might be done with this book. It's kind of cynical. I like Garth Ennis a lot. I do. Preacher was so good. And I like a lot of the Punisher stuff he did. This confused the hell out of me. Maybe I'm dumb. Maybe somebody out there read this and was like, Chris, I can't believe you didn't pick up on exactly what they were laying down. But I had a hard time making sense of it. So I think I'm done. I thought that Thundercats was going on a brief break and getting a Chitara miniseries, but then I saw on this that Thundercats issue 5. It says Declan Shalvey. So I picked it up without thinking about it because I'm like, I'm curious where it's going. But this was definitely some sort of a weird fill-in issue. Once I open it, I find out that Declan Shalvey is story consultant and that Stephen Mooney, is the writer and artist. It's an okay story. It's just Chitara having a sparring match with Lion-O to talk about, like, you know, how he needs to be tough and competent to be the leader. It's kind of some generic stuff. But I will point out one series of drawings that I found kind of unintentionally funny. These two panels. I like this kick pose that Lion-O is doing. That's sort of, it's not quite a leg sweep. It's like he crouched down and kicked out, which I don't know how effective that would be in a fight. But then also, right after that, he punches Chitara in the gut, and you can just see her going like, oh, it's like that kind of a face. She looks utterly surprised. She's going like this. Oh, I'm like, what's going on here? I understand that a fill-in issue might keep the audience in place, but I wasn't digging this too much, to be honest. It didn't really give me anything that I needed, and I didn't love the art. I'm not trying to be mean. It's better than what I could do. I just didn't love it, you know, and that's in the eye of the beholder, you know, what you're going to be attracted to. But like, that was kind of funny to me. Can I focus better so that you can see exactly what I'm talking about with this face? Let me zoom in a little. Hold on. I want to show you this. There. Okay, hold on. Let me hold this steady. There's her face. Oh! Because Lion-O just punched her in the gut. That's kind of funny, right? All right. Oh, geez. Someday I need to get like something nice to hold this camera. She's regretting that cheese dog before the fight. The crotch, that is the cat crotch licking pose Lion-O is doing. Oh, yeah, maybe it is. Maybe it is. It's the cat kick. Call me crazy, but I feel like if you're going to have two cat characters fight each other, something interesting to do that we maybe haven't seen before would be to take inspiration from actual cat fights, where they basically sort of wrap each other up and hold each other in close and try kicking and biting. Maybe that would be dumb, but maybe that would just be something different you could try to do, like at least one or two. I don't know. Her king basically punched her in the gut. Then again, she was telling him to give it his all. So yeah. I showed up at the wrong time. Well, Nick, I was making a criticism but it's not that I'm telling people that it's bad. I just like, it wasn't for me at this moment. This looked funny to me. The 69 rabbit kick. I think that would and I'm never telling somebody this is how you can correct it. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying it inspired me to think, if the Thundercats are going to fight each other as compared to fighting like, Slythe or Mumra, I thought it would be interesting potentially to have them use some actual cat fighting like techniques, scratches and bites. But I don't know. Wrestling moves, exactly. It's all good. We all have a right to our opinions. I do not take offense. If I'm dead next week, folks, might just be that Nick Barucci did not like my opinion. No. But I just was saying, Nick, that I didn't realize this was essentially maybe a fill-in issue, because like it had Declan's name here, and then but I didn't open it up. I was won over by this cover. I don't know a lot about David Nakayama. Do you guys know much about David Nakayama? Because boy, I'll tell you, I really like his covers. I've seen them on a lot of great books. I know Dynamite uses him a bunch. He does some great stuff. Great stuff. And he's got a really fun signature. I used to think that it said Sona before I knew who it was, but it's like, it's a DNA strand, and he writes it DNA, David Nakayama. I love that. It's a great, great cover. It is a great cover. It caught my eye, and it made me buy the book. So, mission accomplished. He does pinups. Has he done interiors? Because if he has, I'd be curious to check out a book that he's done interiors on. He makes Chitara look great. Yeah, he gives her an interesting, like, he definitely has his own interpretation. She's got like a little button nose, and like just the way he like decided to draw the sort of cap markings and stuff like that. It's really pretty is all. I like it. Met David at Dallas Fan Expo. Super nice guy. Does Marvel Legends action figure packaging art. Oh, I didn't know that. That's interesting. Yes, I've seen some of his covers for DC. He's a good cover artist. I've never really made an episode about that, by the way, but I have talked about it here and there. Drawing a cover is sincerely a different set of skills than drawing interior, like panel-to-panel storytelling. And a lot of times, yes, like the same artist can do both, capable of both. I think that like it's a sincere skill to be able to draw a good cover. I know that like my instincts would be to clutter up a cover. It would be like it's really hard to come up with something dynamic and engaging that hints at a story inside, but doesn't like give anything away. Oh, thank you for watching it, Kevin. I was just trying to have fun. I hope that most people know that it's all in fun, because I did love Stan Lee a lot and still do. The Thundercats are technically aliens. Yeah. They're not mutated humans or anything. No. Unless we get some sort of a behind the scenes retcon. No, they're just aliens. They're human-like cats. But it's a world full of aliens. There's other aliens. There's mutants, they're called, and stuff like that. It's a world of sci-fi and supernatural. So Thundercats has some fun elements to it. It really does. And then they hint at some of the fun stuff in here. For instance, they talk about, where is it? Panthro being like not just a great inventor, but like, the best martial artist of them. And I will say that like I thought Kevin Mooney's sort of big panels like this are good. I didn't love the fight scene, but I do like some of those pinups. So anyway, and then I read a few other things, but I don't have big thoughts about them. I read Hulk, Napalm Lullaby, Blood Hunt. I'll talk very briefly about Dick Tracy. It's just a book that I'm enjoying. I'm glad I'm enjoying it. It's a little bit more grounded, but the good news is they still have all the weirdo villains in it, from Mumbles to who else is in this one? Itchy. They've got I think I'm trying to just show some of the weirdos. Where is he? Got Prune Face in this one. We've got Flat Top. He's working for Big Boy. We've got Lips Manless. What they've done to make it just a little more grounded is talk about how Dick Tracy, before being a detective here, they talk a little bit about contrasting that with his work as a soldier in World War II. And so was his friend, Pat Patton. They also are setting up a storyline between basically, I think, two gangsters. And like everybody else is caught in the middle of like a brewing gangster war between Big Boy and Lips Manless, two mobsters. It's really cool. Yeah, so it's fun to see them doing it as super serious as but I feel like Dick Tracy was always super serious. It's just that Chester Gould drew it in a more cartoony way. But I did an episode on Dick Tracy. It's quite violent and like would have like, long elaborate schemes. And at the end of every single one, the gangster guy pretty much always got killed. I feel like Dick Tracy was always pretty grounded and serious. Yeah, Mumbles is in this one. Bring back covers that had nothing to do with what's inside the book. I'd like to see covers come back that have word blurbs on them. I think that would be fun, Let's surprise us. Oh, remember a couple weeks ago, folks, I opened that strange present that like a friend had given me, and it was like a building toy. I built it, and I'll just show you. It was when you finally put it together, it's this action scene of Blade the Vampire Hunter against a bunch of vampires coming out of the ground. It was kind of tricky to put together. It doesn't snap together like Lego and then it's together. It's all sort of soft, moldable rubber, so it sort of almost wants to push against itself sometimes. It was a little tricky, but once you get it all together, it's more or less okay. And it forms this weird 3D diorama. I never had seen these back when they were out. My friend gave this to me. Figure Factory, it was called. It looks cool. It was a fun little toy. I wish it stuck together a little bit more firmly, but I got it together for the most part. It is kind of cool. You used to have the Ghost Rider one? I'd never seen these. These totally flew under my radar. Yeah, it only took me a week to build versus the 5 years the movie's taken so far. But I couldn't fit absolutely everything together. If you look closely, Blade has a stake here, and this vampire actually has a hole. And if I put it in there, basically Blade's torso or legs, something like that, will start to pop loose if I tried to jam that one thing together. So it isn't perfect, but it was cool. Really? I totally never saw these. I like the idea of sort of a buildable diorama. My friend just gave it to me. It was still all bagged up, so it couldn't have cost too much. Yeah, it's like basically in a miniature scale, and it's fairly well painted and detailed for what it is. Thank you. Yeah, I'm very, very happy with the last trash movie bonanza that Jim and I made. If you haven't watched it, there is an episode on this channel where we looked at Howard the Duck and Swamp Thing. We decided to look at two different, Marvel versus DC, technically superhero movies not so good. That said, what do you call it? The Swamp Thing was definitely better than Howard the Duck. We got a quack quack and a so yeah, you get to see us review this on the latest trash movie bonanza. And for the next one, I'll just give you a hint. I don't mind plugging myself. We're going to do Hammer movies. We're gonna look at 2 different vampire movies from Hammer Studios. Hey, good timing, Jim. You got to hear us talking about ourselves. Haven't seen this yet, but I promise to watch it soon. I think you'll like it. Yeah, but this was also Wes Craven's 3rd movie ever, and it was before he ever made Nightmare on Elm Street, so he didn't have the same sort of pull. It's not a totally bad movie. It's just that probably its budget hurt it a little bit. No, didn't watch Twins of Evil. But I will say that our show, Trash Movie Bonanza, now also airs on Sundays at 8 p.m. Pacific on Schraub Home Video. And it seems to be getting a good response over there. I was about to start drawing, but I also just realized that it's really late. So I guess I had laid this out. Someday I'll draw this. This could be any 2 heroes. I was just drawing, I was looking at animation advice, and they were find dramatic curves that intersect and stuff. So I was like, okay, so I've got a curve, and then I'm going to base the bodies around the curve. That was my logic. Jim says, met so many awesome pros and cons peeps at Heroes Con this weekend. Thanks to all you fine folks who stopped by. Oh, that's so nice to hear. I don't think that that's what Guardians is implying. No, because it's a totally different version on Howard the Duck. Dracula 1977 is just a flat out really good movie. We went with more obscure Hammer movies, but still pretty darn interesting, pretty darn cool. I was trying to tell Jim at Heroes we should watch Miami Connection. I'm sure someday we probably could do Miami Connection. We're trying to hit a few that haven't been covered by a lot of the podcasts and YouTube shows that look at bad movies, but there's a reason that people cover some of those movies. It's because they're so entertainingly bad. So I'm not saying no. I'm just saying that initially we are definitely trying to pick some that haven't been talked about as much, or that we just really enjoy for some reason. So yeah. Oh, I don't know about the Hammer Anthology TV show. But I guess that's about it for this week. So plugs. Definitely check out Trash Movie Bonanza on this channel. Definitely check out the latest Comic Tropes, where I just tried to have some fun looking at some Stan Lee projects that I feel like were slightly misguided. Some of the comments, people are thinking that I'm trying to hate on Stan Lee, and some people told me keep Stan Lee's name out of your mouth. Or what gives you the right? And it's dudes, I'm trying to have some fun. I thought that was obvious, where I start with a very silly meme skit at the beginning. I was trying to have some fun, and it wasn't I was going Spider-Man, what a stupid idea. So I just know, if you watch it, I was trying to have fun. That's all I'm ever trying to do. Some people disagree, and a bunch of people will say, I liked, this one thing that you put in, and I'm like, that's fine. I'm not even saying that I disliked it so much as I'm trying to goof on something that I think is fair game. I think it's fair game. So, but you guys are likely to be biased. But don't worry. I keep saying but. Jim and I are definitely going to record another Trash Movie Bonanza very soon. We've already got a plan for that, so it won't be too long until you get another one of those. I like that you guys appreciate it. You keep fun out of your mouth. Thank you, Andy. Andy, I gotta find out what you're doing next. If you ever want to stop by and promote anything, I hope you know that you are more than welcome. I mean, you are here so much, and I really appreciate it. I appreciate all of you. You know what I'll also probably do very soon, folks? I don't know if I'll have time to do it this Friday, but maybe next Friday. Yeah, I think next Friday I'll try to do another one of those live shows where if you have a comic you want to promote, I'll just allow anybody in that wants to talk up their comic, and I'll try to make an interview out of it for a few minutes. And it might be a disaster because there's going to be zero planning, but just trying to give people a way to advertise their thing. Oh, hell yeah. Hell yeah. That I got to watch those final few minutes then. I got to watch those final few minutes or Boston will not allow me back. What else did I have to say? I think I had something else to plug or promote, but it's I guess just, I'll just say this. It's quick. This Saturday, I will be at a convention. Now, it's not as big as, say, last weekend's Heroes Con, but I will be at the Washington Summer Con, which I think is a really nice convention for what it is. It's affordable, and it tends to bring in a really good mix of vendors and guests. It's really impressive. It's in Puyallup, Washington, and people are like, huh? It's a little further south from Seattle, but it's held at the Washington State Fairgrounds, which is pretty big. So, Andy, we would all love to have you here. So, yeah. So, anyway, if by any chance you're in the region and you go to that event, look for me. I'll be there on the floor, just looking to buy comics or T-shirts or something, you know. So, smaller convention, but I kind of love that. Can we talk up old favorites? Quasar is underrated. I've always liked Quasar too. I really liked the Mark Grunwald era of Quasar with art by a very new to comics, Greg Capullo. Very, very cool. Gallop to Puyallup. Yep. All right. I think that's as good a time to end things as any. I don't have any big jokes, but I do have a big appetite. So I think I'm going to go eat some food with my wife and nephew. And next week, if there's less news, maybe then I can draw something, because I haven't drawn on a live stream in a while, and I really enjoy doing that. Thank you, everybody, for the lovely comments and being here. This was a fun one. Wow, we're almost at 3 hours. Yeah, this is definitely a good time to end it. Thanks, everybody. Keep reading comics. Double salute. And as far as comics that I will recommend that didn't come out this week, keep your eyes out for the one that I'm really enjoying, The Last Mermaid. I just want to pimp that one more time because I like it so much. Bye, y'all. Take care.